Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to a special Tuesday matinee edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular, of course.
Not today, my friend. Not today.
Why is that? Oh, you're saying you just got here? Where'd you change your shirt?
Yeah. No. You know, not today for the big one.
Yeah. Yeah, you should get one of
today.
those life alert bracelets so that if it ever happens, you know, at least I know.
You don't have to worry.
Well, that's enough time
You don't
to
have
maybe
to vamp, get a co-host.
It's enough time to maybe give Kid a call, see if he's available, fill in last minute, you know.
Yeah, maybe Tusker. Yeah.
Hey, Russell's on the way to the hospital. You think you can fill in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what it is? I'm always trying to get in the cup of coffee, like brewing right before the show.
Right.
And sometimes it cuts close.
Right. Because of those freshly ground beans. Exactly. Those freshly ground coffee beans. Well, hey, folks. Thanks very much for being here today. Got a great crowd in here to start things off. 557 strong in the YouTube chat. 485 strong over on Rumble. Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button over on Rumble. That is super important. I hope everybody enjoyed the Super Bowl. Not a great Super Bowl, obviously, from an entertainment standpoint, but we do have one Super Bowl segment coming up later in the show. And we were on a little early Sunday for that reason. But we are back on the regular schedule now. Russ leaves for Seattle on Monday. So he will be remote that week. Although I think I'm going to grab probably a co-host for Tuesday, if that is the plan, as I understand. But still got a fun couple weeks of programming coming up for you guys. Looking very much forward to that trip. That's going to be a wild time.
That is good. I've never been to Seattle, even though I lived in San Francisco for a while. I never went up the coast. So, yeah, that's part of why I'm going early. Works out well because Shama's having that protest that now we can cover because I'm getting there then.
Exactly. All right, so why don't we get started? We got a ton to get to today.
All right, let me assume the position.
There you go.
I like to do the stories in Buddha position.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, man. Well, so we are going full South America this week. Threatening judges and such, threatening to drag them out of their houses in their underwear. I just want to assure you there is nothing fascist about those kinds of pronouncements at all. That is not at all an illustration of people gradually acceding to fascism and their frustrations with the current system. Not at all. That's a totally Republican impulse, small r Republican. That's how we do things. We drag judges out of their houses. We would never call that something you'd see in a banana republic if it happened in another country. No, that's all normal. That's all normal. So here's a MAGA shill account. This is Amuse here, putting up, almost like a most wanted here. In an egregious and unconstitutional assault on executive authority, Judge Paul Engelmeyer has unilaterally forbidden all of Trump's political appointees, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, from assessing Treasury Department data. So I don't know about you. I'm really shocked. Here you see Obama judge banned Treasury Secretary from accessing his agency's data. Well, the thing is, this is not a final ruling. It's what you call a restraining order. You see, when you bring something to a court and you make the case that if this is not stopped right now, it's going to do irreparable harm. Very often a judge will say, okay, we're gonna put a freeze on this action until the case can be heard more fully by a court. So my understanding is within a week, this case is going to go before a judge who will make a ruling on whether the plaintiffs are correct. I believe it's 19 AGs from different states who have sued, or whether actually the Trump administration has the right of it, that this judge's ruling. I mean, his ruling is just a restraining order. There's no real ruling about the merits of the case one way or the other. So everything that you're seeing right now, the hysteria, the demand for violence against judges, when things like that were intimated by Democrats, interestingly, a lot of these same people were very upset about it. So all of that is about a 1 week delay. It's about a 1 week delay for this to go in front of a judge. All of this shit that you're seeing right now, 1 week until another judge makes a ruling. That's what that's about. 1 week. So here's Elon. This ruling is absolutely insane. This, by the way, this is the Elon Musk who, when Thai divers rejected his stupid idea about sending a submarine into an angular cave network, called them pedos. That Elon Musk that everyone seems to think is an authority on everything now. This ruling is absolutely insane. How on earth are we supposed to stop fraud and waste of taxpayer money without looking at how money is spent? That's literally impossible. Something super shady is going to protect scammers. Okay, and that's in response to Charlie Kirk, legal expert Charlie Kirk, or as we call him, Catman, who claims that they transform into cats in Haiti. Who better to get legal opinions from than Catman? Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton, who interestingly is on the board of IRI, which our friends at the Gray Zone recently exposed as funding transgender dance troupes in Bangladesh. So Tom Cotton, famous fan of Bangladeshi trans dance troupes. Says,
Bangladeshi trans activist Tom Cotton. Yes.
Outrageous. Obama Judge Paul Engelmayer didn't just bar Elon Musk and DOGE from Treasury systems, he barred the Secretary of the Treasury himself without citing a single law or even allowing Trump administration to appear in court. This outlaw should be reversed immediately, and Engelmayer should be forbidden by higher courts from ever hearing another case against the Trump administration. Well, you know, Tom, you know who's going to make a ruling about that? A court. A court will make a ruling about that. Not in 6 months, not in a year, in a week. In a week. This is a lot of hysteria about going through a legal process that actually is rather expedited given the gravity of the situation.
Well, as I understand, there's a drag show in Lithuania that opens on Wednesday, and so time is of the essence because they really want to get their hands back into the USA. They really want to make sure that does not go forward, and they're running out of time to stop it.
I heard they also are using some Taylor Swift music, so that's just right.
Yeah,
out.
so, you know, look, I mean, look, it is somewhat of an emergency. You have to grant them that.
I will grant them that. Okay, so Stephen Miller, Pete Buttigieg, who we are not fans of, by the way. One of the funniest things I've seen recently is an article, I think, from Slate trying to make the case for Pete Buttigieg as the future of the Democrats. But here's Stephen Miller. Hey, Pat. Hey, Pete. Care to show us the line in the Constitution where it says a lone unelected district judge can assume decision-making control over the entire executive branch affecting 300 million citizens? Any mention of nationwide district court TROs, that's a temporary restraining order, or permanent all-powerful bureaucracy? Now, this is the kind of thing that if there's an author, A. Chud, who thinks that this is actually a very smart observation. And a lot of people who read A. Chud think these kinds of things are very smart because they have no fucking idea what's going on whatsoever. So you could tell them anything, which is very convenient for people who just want to manipulate you to tear down things you don't even understand. But okay, so moving right along, Glenn,
or cut your disability.
Or cut your disability, which we'll get into later. Or hey, man, who better than chalkboard aficionado Glenn Beck to tell you how the law works? Let me see if I have this right. The Treasury Secretary cannot access any data from the Treasury? Wow. Who is afraid the secrets are coming out? This judge was not elected, nor was he given the mandate by the people. Enough is enough. We, the people, demand transparency. It is our money, not yours. All right, so let me just make one thing clear before we go on. I'm not saying there's not a lot of corruption and wasteful spending in the government. That's not in question. And as we said the other day, I think if you want to make the argument that democracy has failed, that the checks and balances have failed, that people with a lot more money than you have hired powerful lawyers to essentially gum up the whole system so that it's not at all responsive to what the people want. We know it's not responsive to what the people want. Stanford did a study of this over a decade ago, I think it is now, showing that if you are at the bottom 80% of income distribution, you have less than 1% chance of your policy preferences being enacted in law. So I'm not in any way defending the system. I'm not saying that a lot of the people defending it are not hypocritical. I think there are elements of some of what they're finding that are not really about corruption. I think it's what Peter Turchin talked about in a lot. Some of it is, but a lot of it is make work programs for the children of the elites. It's a make work program for the PMCs to have them go study tannic acid levels in this variety of wine. It's just making work for these people.
Right.
I think some of it's that, some of it's corruption, obviously the overseas stuff. But if you want to make the argument that there's absolutely no way you would get an audit of that through the legal checks and balance process because the system is too corrupt, I think you could make a case for that. I think you could make a strong case for that. You just don't cloak it in this is democratic, what he's doing and what they're doing. You have to admit at that point that you have given up on constitutionally driven democratic processes, and you are willing at this point to embrace a collapse into authoritarian policy, authoritarianism, monarchy perhaps, as we'll see later. Just own it. Admit that's what you support. Mussolini,
well, you traded in your liberty, right? That's what we got into with the FDR speech last time. They traded in their liberty in the hope of getting something to eat. Or in this case, they traded their liberty in the hope of stopping a trans musical in Ireland. The wokies have become so cringe that the people turned on democracy and chose to own the wokies in exchange for their liberty.
For a little less DEI, they have gotten a lot more fascism. Yeah. Hey, I can. You can.
The Swifties overstepped their bounds.
Yeah.
And the people said enough is enough.
The people rose up. Hey, you can make that argument, but just remember the people who now are saying this is democratic, this is democracy. They called Rome a republic for centuries after it had become an empire where the emperor had absolute power. They still had a Senate. The Senate basically did kind of administrative small ball stuff. But anytime it basically became part of the bureaucracy. But if the emperor just wanted to accuse you of treason and execute you, he could. It was no longer a republic. But they called it that because it was the branding. The Romans like to see themselves that way. They like to see themselves as a republic. So that's why none of these people will admit that they have given up on democracy, that they don't believe in it anymore. They won't just come out and say, yes, we think democracy has failed, and we think you need a strong, central, authoritarian leader who is unchecked by any power to be in charge. Just admit that that's what you're advocating for, because that's what this is. If courts cannot check Elon Musk and they cannot check the president, who can? Who can then?
Well,
if the courts have no authority, who does?
Right. Well,
the Congress can't. The Congress has the power of the purse. You want to talk about the Constitution? Explicitly, Congress has the power of the purse, and the executive does not have the power to arbitrarily change funding against the wishes of Congress. Now, you're saying he does have that authority. Okay. Well, so who is a check on the executive at that point? You're saying Congress is not. You're saying the courts are not. So at that point, nobody does.
Right.
Nobody has that authority. That is authoritarianism. That is a completely unchecked strongman executive.
Exactly. Hakeem Jeffries went on the podium last week and said, well, look, we're doing the best we can, but we have no leverage because we're the minority party. And that begged the question, in my view, well, even if you weren't the minority party, you'd still have no leverage if things operate according to how they are now. I mean, Congress is now completely out of the picture. If the executive has the power to bring in some guy, now in this case, some guy is the richest guy on earth, but it could be anybody, according to this model, bring in some guy to rifle through and block congressionally mandated spending, then at that point, the legislature is completely obsolete. There's no reason for them to be there at all, no matter who the majority is. So now it's a battle between the executive and the courts. And if the courts have no check over the executive, then there is no checks and balances.
And there is none
anymore.
Who's the
and as for this line that, well, who elected this judge? Well, you could say who elected Elon Musk. Now you could say, well, Elon Musk campaigned with Donald Trump, who then appointed Elon Musk. Okay, well, this judge has been referred to just a few times in this segment as an Obama judge. So the people elected Obama, who appointed the judge. Now, if you want to say there should be term limits on judges so that judicial appointees from presidents of a bygone era don't have this influence over the system years or even decades after that president is out of office, okay, that's fair, but that's a completely different topic.
That's a different argument.
Right.
All right, so to move along to get into some of the details here. So now Musk is calling to impeach the judge whose order blocks DOGE from Treasury systems access. Elon Musk is called to impeach a federal judge in New York, Paul Engelmeyer, over an order that temporarily restricts the tech centi-billionaire and his DOGE team from accessing the U.S. Department of the Treasury payment systems and sensitive data. Musk and his special government employees, who are part of his, we'll probably cover those winners on Thursday, who are part of his Department of Government Efficiency Initiative, are tasked by President Donald Trump with finding ways to slash the federal budget, massively reduce the federal workforce, and eliminate as many federal regulations and agencies as possible. Thus far, Musk's DOGE team has mostly targeted agencies that use a tiny portion of the overall federal budget, including the Foreign Humanitarian Assistance Agency, USAID. DOGE specifically, quote, sought access to the U.S. Department of Treasury payment system to stop money from flowing to the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Associated Press previously reported. Engelmeyer, a U.S. district judge appointed by former President Barack Obama, issued an order temporarily blocking DOGE from accessing those systems on Saturday in response to a complaint brought by 19 states' attorneys general against Trump, the Treasury, and its newly appointed Secretary Scott Bessent. In response to Musk's remarks, New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin, who is among the plaintiffs in the case, told CNBC via email, "What's shady is a tech billionaire breaking the law to try to steal millions of Americans' sensitive data." The attorneys general from 19 states argued in their complaint that Trump failed to faithfully execute the laws enacted by Congress in giving Musk and his team unparalleled access to the Treasury's computer systems and taxpayers' sensitive data stored or processed in them. Now, some people have asked, well, what does Elon Musk want with all that data from the Treasury system? What would he do with it? Well, Elon Musk just very recently, or his CEO, Linda Yaccarino, you can look it up on X, recently announced that they had partnered with Visa to start to turn X into a payment system. He has said that he wants to turn X into an American version of WeChat.
Right, the everything
WeChat
app.
is the Chinese everything app where you have all your social media, your payments, you have everything on one platform. So seems to me all that data would be kind of useful to a guy in that line of work, as would be getting rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which regulates fintech.
And we won't get ahead of this. I won't get into detail, but I think it belongs in this clip as well, just as a reference point. They're going to try and take your Social Security, your Medicare, your Medicaid, your welfare, and your disability. They're going to come for all 5 of those things to put you in the poorhouse for life, to make you a serf for life. That's what they're going to do. More details in a separate clip on that, but I think it belongs here as a flag.
Yes. Yeah. We are going to be covering that. Platkin said via an emailed statement, "We absolutely expect the defendants to comply with the order which the court issued in light of the egregiously illegal actions at issue and the enormous risk they pose to cybersecurity and privacy. Our nation is built on the rule of law, and we intend to pursue it to the maximum extent to protect our residents," unquote. According to legal scholars, the judiciary historically has been able to restrain the executive branch from violating the Constitution and other laws. Joyce White Vance, a law professor at the University of Alabama School of Law and legal analyst for NBC News, wrote in an email on Sunday, quote, "The Constitution and our rule of law tradition are set up so that the courts have jurisdiction to consider the scope of power possessed by the executive branch, the president, when his actions are challenged. That's why we are seeing groups of state AGs go to court to challenge whether Trump has legal authority to take steps like canceling birthright citizenship, suspending congressionally authorized spending, and sending DOGE out to federal agencies." She noted that centuries of precedent established the role of the courts in checking overreach by the executive branch, including cases like Youngstown Sheet and Tubing Company versus Sawyer, where the U.S. Supreme Court refused to let President Harry S. Truman take over U.S. steel mills during the Korean War. Now, J.D. Vance does not agree with this take at all. If a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general and how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal.
Neither example applies remotely to this case.
Neither applies, and actually he's wrong in both instances. If a general did something violative of the Constitution, that would actually fall to a judge to instruct them. Ditto with an attorney general. That is what the court system is for, to determine if an action is unconstitutional. They wouldn't have jurisdiction in all cases. They wouldn't be able to evaluate a strategic error.
They don't have broad jurisdiction over that decision. They could go after you if you commit a crime or violate the Constitution, but that's not what they're doing in this case. That's just a complete straw man.
And all of this hysteria is about a temporary restraining order so that the case can be heard in a week. In a week. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. J.D. Vance has a fucking law degree.
No, he's the lying scumbag. Look, the whole dispute here is whether or not the executive is exercising legitimate power.
Wait. Let me get to this because this is related. Okay, so J.D. Vance, interestingly, and we're going to see what his real agenda is at the end of this segment, because he's laid it out pretty clearly. I didn't see J.D. Vance saying anything when Republicans were using the judicial process to stop Biden. They're calling it lawfare now. I mean, they did it quite frequently to stop Biden. Republican-led U.S. states sue over new Biden student debt relief plan, right? They went to the courts with the understanding that it is the jurisdiction of the court to evaluate the constitutionality of a presidential action. They never questioned this until now. All of a sudden, they're shocked they would have you believe, at the idea the courts have the power that they just used them to check the Biden administration with. Republicans sue over 3-year-old Biden executive order on voter registration access. Wow. It seems like Republicans believe that the courts have the authority to stop a president from taking an executive action. It seems like they believe that very deeply until November 5th. They believed that they had that power through the courts. Over 20 GOP-led states sue Biden administration over Title IX rules for LGBTQ students. This is the kind of thing you'd find out if you took 5 minutes to do some fucking research before spouting off on these kinds of issues. It's really not hard, man. It's not hard. I don't have a team here. I just went on the Google machine. It was very easy to find this out. Just being in this space, I knew the Republicans had repeatedly sued Biden to stop his orders. I don't know how anyone who does this for a living would not know that.
Well, when you're in the minority, you lean heavy on the courts. That's because that's the only leverage you could possibly exert.
Of course. This is not hard stuff. Hard stuff. The idea that courts have no authority over the executive and then not to ask the next question, well, then who does? Nobody? The answer that Trump was elected, that's not an answer. What you're saying is we elect kings at that point. You're saying once somebody is elected, you're going back pre-Magna Carta. Like you're getting rid of the idea of any restraint on the executive whatsoever. And if there is, who is it? If it's not the courts, if it's not Congress, who is it? These are very obvious questions. And if you just took a minute before you spout off, you would actually very clearly know that it's kind of nonsensical, this hysterical fit that they're throwing about a temporary restraining order, something they were very happy to employ against every Democratic administration ever, including the last one. I've never heard of such a thing, that courts have the power to limit the executive. They're all feigning ignorance. They never heard anything like this before. All right, so there are no contradictions, right? When you think you found a contradiction, check your premises. If you understand what their actual agenda is, which is very consciously an agenda to get rid of democracy, everything they're doing actually makes a lot of sense. So this is something I suspect you'll be hearing a lot about over the next few years, just like we got into how Christopher Rufo's education plan, if you go and you read it, that's exactly what Trump did when he got into office. If you look at Curtis Yarvin, his ideas very neatly fit exactly what the administration is doing and what Elon Musk is doing. Curtis Yarvin wants American democracy toppled. He has some prominent Republican fans. So we're not going to read all of this, but we'll read some of it. In September 2021, J.D. Vance, a GOP candidate for Senate in Ohio, this is before he got elected, appeared on a conservative podcast to discuss what is to be done with the United States, and his proposals were dramatic. He urged Donald Trump, should he win another term, to, quote, seize the institutions of the left, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat in the U.S. government, replace them with our people, and defy the Supreme Court if it tries to stop him. To the uninitiated, all that might seem stunning, but Vance acknowledged he had an intellectual inspiration. Quote, so there's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who has written about some of these things. All starting to make sense now? This all starting
this
to
is
fall
why
into
Vance
place
is
for
where
you?
he is. He is the liaison between Trump and the lizard
and
people.
Thiel. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nearly a decade earlier, a Stanford law student named Blake Masters is another one of these broligarchs who he ran for Congress in, I believe, Arizona.
Ran for Senate in Arizona, lost. He was one of the freaks who lost in the midterms.
Lost.
One of the
he
Trump
lost.
freaks.
Trump endorsed him. Yeah.
The guy looks like a literal android. I mean, the guy looks like a robot. I mean, he's a very scary person.
Came from the same factory as Zuckerberg.
The whole package, not good. Believe me, not good. No.
Nearly a decade earlier, a Stanford law student named Blake Masters, asked by a friend for reading recommendations for a book club, emailed a link to a set of blog posts. These posts made an argument that was quite unusual in the American context, asserting that the democratically elected U.S. government should be abolished and replaced with a monarchy. Its author, then writing pseudonymously, was Yarvin. In many thousand words worth of blog posts over the past 15 years, computer programmer and tech startup founder Curtis Yarvin has laid out a critique of American democracy, arguing that its liberals and elite academic institutions, media outlets, and the permanent bureaucracy who hold true power in this declining country, while the U.S. executive branch has become weak, incompetent, and captured. But he stands out among right-wing commentators for being probably the single person who spent the most time gaming out how exactly the U.S. government could be toppled and replaced, quote, rebooted or reset, as he likes to say, with a monarch, CEO, or dictator at the helm. Yarvin argues that a creative and visionary leader, a startup guy, like he says Napoleon or Lenin was, interesting, should seize absolute power, dismantle the old regime, and build something new in its place. To Yarvin, incremental reforms and half measures are necessarily doomed. The only way to achieve what he wants is to assume absolute power, and the game is all about getting to a place where you can pull that off. Critics have called his ideas fascist, a term he disputes, arguing that centralizing power under one ruler long predates fascism, and that his ideal monarch should rule for all rather than fomenting a class war as fascists do. Autocratic fits as a descriptor, though his preferred term is monarchist. You won't find many on the right saying they wholly support Yarvin's program, especially the monarchy thing, but his critique of the status quo and some of his ideas for changing it have influenced several increasingly prominent figures. Besides Vance and Masters, whose campaigns declined to comment for this story, Yarvin has had a decade-long association with billionaire Peter Thiel. Masters is another Peter Thiel acolyte, who is similarly disillusioned with democracy and American government. Quote, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible, Thiel wrote in 2009. Well, Thiel's not in the government, right? Well, he kind of is. He kind of is. We'll probably cover this Thursday. This is from Wired Scoop. We've learned at least 3 individuals closely associated with Palantir or its co-founder Peter Thiel were involved in an online recruiting effort for DOGE late last year. Step inside the recruitment effort that helped build Elon's DOGE army. So you get it now? You get it now? You get what's happening? Does any of this really sound compatible with democracy, or does it sound very, very compatible with what Curtis Yarvin proposed? They are forcing a constitutional crisis. They are taking it to a place where, just as Yarvin advised, they're doing clearly illegal and unconstitutional things. They're, I think, evaluating correctly that the people are so disappointed in democracy that they're not going to really say much. Also, the institutions, which, yes, are deeply corrupt, that have not served the public well, have so completely lost authority. There are no authoritative voices to tell people what's true and what isn't true. You could tell people fucking anything. And this is why you have all of these people running around showing tweets as evidence. People who know nothing about the law, know nothing about history, know absolutely nothing. It will just read a tweet and say, see, complete, absolute ignorance. This is the dream population for people like Curtis Yarvin who want to overthrow the government. When you have people who are so ignorant of the Constitution, who are so ignorant of the checks and balances of the system, that you can tell them that the anti-democratic thing is trying to restrain the executive. That the way our system works is once you elect a president, they have absolute power. Okay, so why didn't we get student loan forgiveness then? If that's how the system is set up, then why didn't we get student loan forgiveness? Why were the courts able to stop Biden? And again, this is a temporary restraining order. This isn't even permanent. You can appeal this all the way up to the Supreme Court once a ruling is made if they don't like the ruling. Now, you feel that that system doesn't work, and I think you can make that case. Well, own it. Say you agree with Yarvin. You think we should not have democracy anymore because it wasn't working for us. You want to get rid of it, and you want to be ruled by a strong man and his crafty minions. That's what you want. Just make a case for that. Don't pretend that you believe that this is democratic, or don't be so ignorant that you actually believe that. Maybe do deeper research than what some jackass tweeted out on Twitter.
Yeah, this explains also the timing of this, why they're going so hard, so fast right now, just after they took office.
And that's why they're getting so hysterical, because they're trying to get all this done before anybody can.
Right, they want to get it all done
before
Trump's poll numbers start to slip. You know, presidents have their honeymoon period. Right now, he has the most political capital he's likely to have right now. That's why Obama tried to tackle health care first. Did a horrible job of it, but he did that first because he had the political capital. He could afford to lose some. They could afford to maybe lose some here. That's why they're doing this right now, and that's why they want it to happen as quickly as they possibly can, while people are still rightfully frustrated with the old way of doing things. You have so many rank and file people now saying, well, thank God things are finally getting done. And they're looking to all of the USAID stuff. They're looking to all of the culture war issues, the dismantling of DEI, and look at this, 47 grand on a musical in Ireland, right? You're right. It is the perfect circumstance under which to orchestrate a billionaire coup, which is what this is. This is a billionaire-dominated fascist coup. They have everything in place, including, perhaps most importantly, the information delivery system, which is this, Twitter. Who owns that? Elon, the same guy who's going to take a knife to the social safety net, right? They will get you to volunteer for your own destruction. That to me seems the overarching sort of thesis of, you know, like the Whitney Webosphere, if you will, that they will impose totalitarianism, not necessarily entirely by force, but with your consent. Your consent. They will get you to
enthusiastic
vote for it,
consent.
and they will get you to cheer it on. And that is exactly what they are doing right now.
Yeah. Tusker actually sent this to me a while ago. We were thinking about covering it. We never did. A guy did a video about how there was a game app. I think it might have been Pokemon, actually. And he was talking about how actually this was all a scheme to get everyone to do global mapping for free.
Well, the Pokemon Go, where you would go and look for Pokemon on the street. So you would use your camera to walk around your street in your town, and they would show a Pokemon there.
Right. And then they took all that data and they sold it. They created a global map from people playing the game. These people are very intelligent. They're smarter than me. They're smarter than you. They mapped out how to take out the government, and they're doing it. They're doing it. You know, Elon taking over Musk. I never taken over X. I never bought all the people saying, "Yeah, it's so stupid. He paid that much money." I never bought that. I always felt there was a bigger. But I certainly did not buy he did it for his love of free speech. He started whacking people he didn't like or who tweeted something he didn't like almost as soon as he took it over.
Yep.
What better position could you be in if you're trying to have total control over communication in an atmosphere where, rightly, people don't trust the media anymore? So now, God, man, this is something dictators have dreamed of. They've dreamed of that you would have total control of communications and you would just all edicts, everything that you say, people wouldn't question. And anytime you referred people to another authority, they would say, "Oh, you believe them?"
Right.
You could do anything with a population like that. They're putty in your hands.
Yep. And do it they are. Absolutely. Brett Yoendo, thanks for the $5. The disregard both administrations show for human life in Gaza indicates that they'll be willing to do to anyone, indicates what they'll be willing to do to anyone once the right tools of power are in place. Well, that's correct. I agree. That's what Hedges writes about. You know, what we do to populations overseas will eventually come home. So, yes, I agree. Thanks, Brett Yoendo. Jeff Gomes, thanks for the $10. Illegal annexation of Hawaii. Clinton signed the 1993 apology resolution, Public Law 103150. No treaty of annexation between Hawaii and the U.S. and the Queen. Filed a petition, opposing annexation. All right. Ryan, thanks for the €20. Question, doesn't the president have latitude over discretionary funds and how those monies are spent since he appoints the heads of these agencies under the executive branch? Well, it's still congressionally mandated funding, is it not? I mean, that's as I understand.
Yes. Well, what was that? The argument that because it was created by executive order, it can be disbanded by executive order? Doesn't he have latitude over discretionary funds and how those monies are spent since he appoints the heads of the agencies under the executive branch? But the heads of agencies are not making any of those calls right now. It's just, it's 19-year-olds under Elon. Right? Right. And Congress appropriates the funding. You can't just decide to defund an agency. Now, again, you want to say, well, the system is so corrupt, this is the only way that you could have defunded something like USAID. I won't argue with that. I won't. Like what? Harris in a million years would have done those things? But you have to be honest about what you're advocating for if that's a solution that you're comfortable endorsing.
Right. Muscole saw U.S. wanted a king, so he said, who better than me? Thank you, Mrs. Appreciate that. Hillary Hitton says, I follow a dude on the World Wide Web who thinks that Elizabeth Fraser of the Cocteau twins is an end times prophet, which is batshit crazy unless it isn't. Thank you, Hillary Hitton. Appreciate that. Looking back, I'd rather spend my $27 on a bottle of T-Bird and some Whippets. Thanks, abiding. Appreciate that. Yerrick Rousseau, Mahomes should have insured with Allstate instead of State Farm to avoid mayhem of Philly Eagles. Yes, indeed. Hillary Hinton, fascists. I hate those guys. I guess I picked the wrong day to quit drinking Hawaiian punch and ketamine. Thank you, Hillary Hinton. Appreciate that. The only good news these days is the accelerationism. Go Donald, bring it all crashing down. Yeah, that is one perspective. Hillary Hinton. Oh, sorry, got that one already. Should we start hoarding pennies now? Yes, that's right. That's one more plan to do away with the penny. Nocturnal Human says you should make Sparky his own scroll with all his classics. Call it the Sparky Scroll. He's the BlackRock of independent media. I like that. The BlackRock of independent media. That's good. Okay, I accidentally deleted that one, so let's pull up here. Beautiful. Not a Rumble rant, but all right. Let's move on here to segments number 2. All right, folks. So here's some more news on the Gaza fronts. Not good news. Here is Donald Trump doubling down on his plan to buy Gaza, to buy it and to own it. So here he is, February 9th. This was tweeted out, 6:08 p.m.
Committed to buying and owning Gaza. As far as us rebuilding it, we may give it to other states in the Middle East to build sections of it. Other people may do it through our auspices. But we're committed to owning it, taking it, and making sure that Hamas doesn't move back. There's nothing to move back into. The place is a demolition site. It'll be, the remainder will be demolished. Everything's demolished. I mean, you can't live in those buildings right now. They're very unsafe. But we'll make it into a very good site for future development.
There you go. Make it into a very good site for future development. Later on, he clarified that no, the Palestinians would not have the right to return to Gaza once the revamp is complete. So here he is making the case to level it entirely and build it into something new without any Palestinians there.
Well, everyone leaves, they go back. This has been going on for forever, right? Forever. Now it's essentially a demolition site. There's practically no building that's livable in the whole thing, on the whole Gaza Strip. I say We go in, we knock them all down, we just create some, no more Hamas, there's no Hamas there, there's nobody there. We move them into beautiful areas of the Middle East. I'd like to go to Egypt. They have a lot of land. I'd like to go to Jordan. I'd like to go to others. And we'll build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful...
We've been saying this for a year. He views this all through the lens of real estate development. That is how he views this conflict.
We'll put in an ice cream parlor. You'll have those cocktails with the little umbrellas. It'll be beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better... In other words...
No, they wouldn't. Let's play that one more time.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better... In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could ever... It's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. You know, we give them billions and billions of dollars a year.
Yep, we give them billions and billions of dollars a year. That's aid that he is now, of course, threatening to cut off if they don't take the Palestinians in. That's a segment for perhaps another time, but I thought I should mention that. Now, just to clarify, what about the Palestinians that won't leave? Because, of course, we have seen numerous interviews with numerous Palestinians saying they won't leave, which is, of course, consistent with any literate view of history. If they were going to leave, they'd have done so decades ago. They didn't exactly have it easy there. They didn't have it made until October of 2023. So if they were going to just get up and leave, they'd have done that. In fact, the entire nature of this quote-unquote conflict, and it's more of a theft than a conflict, but the entire nature of this conflict, if you want to call it that, is that they won't leave because it's their land, right? Like that's like, if you know the first thing about this, you know that the Palestinians are not going to willingly leave. But here he is saying they're all going to leave.
You just won't leave. Our team has spoken to many.
They're all going to leave when they have a place that's a better alternative. When they have a nice place that's safe, they're all going to leave. It's a hellhole right now.
But how are you so sure? Would the U.S. force them to leave?
You're going to see that they're all going to want to leave.
Yeah.
No, they're going to leave. They're going to leave.
Yeah, you're going to see that they're all going to leave. They're all going to leave. Now, as for this ceasefire that we have going, because this gets even worse, it gets even uglier. In fact, much uglier, and then this could get much uglier in a very short period of time. He rounds this out with a threat: if all of the hostages are not returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I would say cancel it, meaning the ceasefire, and all bets are off. All of them, not in drips and drabs. Now, keep in mind, the agreement was to release hostages a little bit at a time in accordance with the development of the ceasefire, right? Now, we probably have to say this for our YouTube overlords, but I'll say it anyway. Of course, we're not opposed to hostages being released. The goal is to release them in accordance with the phased-out ceasefire to make sure that the war does not continue. And, for the record, of course, there have already been numerous full and complete hostage exchanges put on the table in exchange for permanent ceasefires, right? So it is not in opposition. We don't say this in opposition to hostage release. But of course,
Yoav Gallant came out and took personal responsibility for stopping hostage deals.
Exactly. But of course, you have to do it in phases to make sure that the ceasefire doesn't fall apart and the genocide does not continue, right? That's the whole point of that framework. All right, so here we go. Here he is talking about maybe that ceasefire should just be canceled.
I would say this, and I'm going to let that because that's Israel's decision, but as far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock. And after that, I would say all hell is going to break out.
Okay. Now
that is the Sabbath, so they are going to have to arrange some Shabbos goys to receive the hostages. But
yeah, right, exactly.
I understand they have a battalion of those. They have a ministry of Shabbos goys in Israel.
Right, exactly.
Do that kind of thing.
So I just want everybody to understand just how absolutely evil and vile that is. Because if the ceasefire were to abruptly end Saturday at noon, what you have to understand is the carnage would likely reset to what it was on October 8th, 9th, and 10th. Because don't forget, you don't have Palestinians in camps and safe zones now. A lot of them have returned home, or at least to where their homes used to be. So a lot of them are scattered throughout these cities now, both in the north and the south, not in camps and safe zones. Not that the safe zones were really all that safe. Obviously, we've reported more times than I can count how many times Israel fired on the safe zones. But you don't even have that pretense anymore. Now it would just be like starting this entire thing all over again against a people who have already suffered immensely in unspeakable ways for 15 months. Now Donald Trump changes the terms and says, no, we're not going to do a drip, drip, drip hostage release. You give them all back without agreeing to phase 2, apparently, or else hell will break out. What reason do we have to believe? What reason do the Palestinians have to believe that all hell will not break out once they give all the hostages back? Given Trump is on the record saying his plan is to ethnically purge the area.
Right.
So you're going to give all the hostages back, and then what? They're going to try and force you out anyway. And if you don't leave, of course, the only way to get you to leave is to attack you violently, just as they have been attacked violently for the past 7 decades, but especially, of course, in this context, over these last 15 months. So it is just psychotically and diabolically evil to impose these
he's just
terms.
playing Netanyahu.
Yeah,
playing
right.
him.
No, he's just playing him. He's just playing him. This is why I said, folks, it is now no longer an exaggeration, nor is it unfair to call Donald Trump a Nazi. He brought Netanyahu to the White House, granted him a victory after perpetrating the most sinister and sadistic crime of our lifetimes. That is what a Nazi does. This is also what a Nazi does. We're going to change the terms of the ceasefire with less than a week's notice, promise all hell will break loose if you do not comply, and even if you do comply, our goal remains to force you off the land anyway by force if necessary. Now, if you think there's any chance of a ceasefire being put back together, it's a show. This is reported by Haaretz. Israeli sources believe Netanyahu intends to derail Gaza ceasefire as delegation heads to Doha. Israeli sources believe Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu intends to sabotage the hostage release deal, and the delegation heading to Qatar will not advance stage 2 of the agreement. It's a show, said one source. Netanyahu is signaling quite clearly that he doesn't want to move to the next phase. He's sending a team without a mandate and without the ability to do anything. The source believes the images of hostages being freed have significantly hurt Netanyahu in the polls. Right-wing voters see that we haven't defeated Hamas and its operatives are still roaming with weapons. The signs on stages in Gaza during the hostage return events mock Netanyahu and reference to his total victory slogan, he said. Netanyahu knows he doesn't have a government if he proceeds with the deal. Netanyahu's still on trial for corruption, by the way. Those have not stopped.
Yeah.
Another source warned that Netanyahu's conduct could jeopardize even the stage 1 of the deal. The process is not working. Hostages are being released, but Hamas is doing this with the expectation of a second stage, leading to a full ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Once Hamas realizes there won't be a second stage, they may not complete the first, the source said. Add to this, the State Department lays out plans for $7 billion plus arms sale to Israel as Netanyahu visits D.C. So Michael Tracy sums it all up pretty nicely. Trump now says that unless Hamas releases all remaining hostages by Saturday at noon, Israel may resume the war and let hell break out. looks like he's intentionally blowing up the ceasefire framework shortly after transferring 2,000-pound bombs to Netanyahu. Yes, it sure does look that way. And it looks increasingly like what I said about a week ago is true, which is that the whole point from Trump's perspective of negotiating the initial ceasefire was to get some hostages out so he can have a nice photo op on Inauguration Day and come in with the goodwill of being the quote-unquote peacemaker. But now, as you can see, he doesn't have a long-term plan for Gaza that includes the Palestinians, so he wants to force them out. Plus, Netanyahu's having political problems, which we always knew he would have major political problems once the war ends. It's pretty much common knowledge now. It's almost a fact. It's almost a given fact. That's how wide and broad the consensus is amongst all corners of the political news and commentary space that Netanyahu has no political career past the end of the war. That's why he's keeping it going. Right. So this is becoming a big problem for him. Trump is having a big problem here because what if the Palestinians refuse to leave? He can't commit troops. That would be too unpopular. So what's he going to do? Well, what's he going to do? He's going to help Netanyahu sabotage this deal. Right. And the bombing is going to continue. I hope to God I'm wrong about that. We now have 5 days to find out. And even if they do give all the hostages back and the ceasefire remains in place, how long does that ceasefire remain in place when the Palestinians refuse to leave? So when you add all of this together, this is now genocide and ethnic cleansing by Netanyahu with the explicit help now of Donald Trump, which is why Spanish politician, she's made a bunch of great videos, Ione Belarra, I hope I said that name right, I'm not sure, but she's made a bunch of videos of this nature for the past year or so. Netanyahu is a genocidal perpetrator, but by supporting him, Trump is too. So let's take a look at this.
Americano Donald Trump y Netanyahu se reunieron en la Casa Blanca. El objetivo de este encuentro era dar luz verde, dar apoyo explícito por parte de los Estados Unidos a los planes de exterminio del pueblo de Palestina, particularmente de sacar a toda la población palestina de Gaza. Esto es un crimen contra la humanidad y es colaboración explícita con genocidio. Desde aquí quiero preguntarle al Gobierno de España si no va a romper de una vez por todas los lazos con los genocidas. El alto al fuego, ya lo hemos visto claramente, no frena ese ansia de exterminio del pueblo de Palestina del Estado terrorista de Israel. Por eso necesitamos mantener fuerte, necesitamos mantener alta la presión política. Es hora de romper todos los lazos con los genocidas y particularmente de aplicar un embargo total de armas que nos permita hacer la presión suficiente para que este genocidio termine. Y por supuesto hay que llevar ante la justicia internacional no solo a Netanyahu, sino también a la administración norteamericana y particularmente al presidente Trump, que está siendo colaborador necesario en este genocidio.
No lies detected there. Nope. No lies detected there. So, you know, I said this on the last show, last couple shows. It's now not hyperbole to call Donald Trump a Nazi. I'm also ordering a temporary, reprieve on the term Trump derangement syndrome now. I don't really want to hear about Trump derangement syndrome when he is overseeing this. I'm sorry.
Well, you know what's interesting. We spent a year and a half saying the same thing about Biden, that he's a Nazi, that he's enabling a genocide, that this is a genocidal administration. And a lot of people who are defending Trump now, they liked that. They liked that. But apparently when you apply it to Trump, it's Trump derangement syndrome, or what I'm seeing from a lot of the MAGA from Palestine people at this point is, well, what you going to do?
Right, exactly.
What you going to do? It's over. It's over. What are you going to do? It was absolutely hair on fire when Biden owned it. That was predictable. We knew that was coming.
Of course.
All of these people in the space, you just did a piece about them all coping as soon as he unveiled his Trump Tower Gaza edition plan.
Right.
It's as the horrific images start to come in from the inevitable consequence of these policies, which, yes, we knew this was going to happen, because in what world would Netanyahu honor this. We always knew they were going to find an excuse to break the ceasefire and to continue the genocide. And Trump would sign off on it and enable it. So now what are all these clowns going to do as the same or worse images that we saw under Biden start to come out of Gaza? Or will they not? Will Elon now suppress them from X in a way that he didn't when those images were hurting Biden? Is it going to become now very difficult with the clampdown on TikTok and Elon owning X? Is he going to allow a lot of images like that to be distributed? We'll see. We'll see. That remains to be seen. But if images like that are coming out, and certainly we'll be getting them from some of the international press, what are the Dave Smiths going to say then? What are the Ian Carrolls going to say then? What are they going to say?
Big bag of shit to be holding. I'll tell you that. I will tell you that. And, look, I mean, we don't know for a fact that was the conversation that happened behind the scenes. But when you look at the sequence of events, I think this is quite plausible that his advisors said, sir, Mr. President, I can tell you as someone who has, a basic knowledge of Middle Eastern history and politics that the Palestinians are not going to leave. Right. And so if you make that your policy and Netanyahu agrees, at that point we are stuck having to enforce this policy as the United States.
Right.
So what we should probably do is figure out a way to sabotage this ceasefire so that Israel could just finish the job themselves, so that we don't have to commit troops, so that our position looks more or less like Biden's position, so that the America Firsters won't have to send their children to Gaza to go die in a war for Israel. We better just figure out a way to blow this deal up so that Israel could just keep killing them. And I guess they'll just kill them all. I guess that is their plan at this point. Now, once again, I would love to be wrong about this. We're now 5 days away. I would love to be wrong about this. However, even if I am wrong about this, that gets you back to the first problem that I just outlined, which is their official policy now is these people have to leave, and they're not going to. So at that point, what happens? There was never a possibility that this would end on terms that remotely resemble any kind of justice. Any kind of justice. Justice is a fully liberated Palestine. And there was never any option. There was never any possibility that this would end that way, which is why, and we said this before the election, we said, don't piss in our face and tell us it's raining with this Trump is going to solve this. It's not going to be solved on any good terms. It's going one way the wrong way, which is why people have to be oppositional to this administration. Because it's just like you have these fucking bandits looting the public funds. You have this Nazi inviting the war criminal of our time to Washington, granting him victory, promising him more victory, basically implying we're going to back him up on the plan to ethnically purge Gaza if he can't do it himself. And now he's looking like he's going to force him to do it himself because they're going to try to figure out a way to sabotage this deal.
Right.
So you tell me where the people are at. The people are at. The people have been completely fried. Their brains have been completely fried. This country is completely washed.
Yeah, and
it falls to people who actually pay attention to actually resist meaningfully. Not with pussy hats, but meaningfully.
Yeah, and if you were running around for 4 years, or for the last year and a half at least, screaming about Joe Biden and how this was a deal breaker, and all of a sudden you can work with the Trump administration on this, and on this you disagree, I'm sorry, you're a fucking clown. You're a clown, because you could have said that about them. You could have said that about Biden. What, they weren't better about the NLRB? They weren't good, but they were certainly better. One of Trump's first acts was to just completely neutralize it by, illegally firing 2 of its members so that it can't form a quorum to make decisions and take actions. It's one of the first things he did. So, yeah, the Biden administration was bad, but if you're that morally flexible, then you could have made the same argument, right? I'll work with them on this. I'll work with them on that. Same argument. All of a sudden now it's Trump. At that point, you have to admit you just didn't want to do pronouns. Like at that point, why would you support a policy that I'm not going to go so far as to say worse, because I think Biden would have, or Harris would have just slow walked us to the same place, whereas they're just doing it right out front. A lot of the logic is probably, let's get the genocide over with at the beginning, so by the time we get to 2028, people forgot about it.
Yeah, this just would have taken a few years under Harris. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's the only real difference. Yeah. I don't say any of this to defend Kamala Harris. That's why we absolutely refuse to vote for her, because we were not.
Absolutely not. But Trump has turned into but Biden. You bring all this up about Trump. What about Biden? Yeah, we talked about it for 4 fucking years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yes, we're very well aware of the problems of Biden. That's why we didn't support him or Harris when she took his slot. We didn't support either of them, nor did we support Trump. We don't all of a sudden support Trump now. What he's doing now was very predictable. It has been very sad. It has been very sad seeing a lot of folks attach themselves to this administration, and we warned about it from before the inauguration that, this guy's probably going to go do a genocide, and then you're going to be connected to that. You're going to wind up being stuck in a position where you have to put out all these mealy mouth statements. Oh, he's playing 3D chess. Oh, did you see Netanyahu's face? Yeah, I saw Netanyahu's face. He looked like the devil who just ate the canary, to mix my metaphors. He was like this. He looked like
it's a good thing I rubbed one out before I came out here, because otherwise this would be embarrassing.
That's how
he looked. And he said right after the press conference, or that night, whatever it was, on TV, on Fox News, it's a remarkable plan. This is the best plan I've heard from an American leader. He calls Donald Trump the best friend Israel's ever had in the White House.
This is what Israel has been trying to do for its entire history, to clear all these people out, and Trump just said he'll do it for them.
Yeah, and let me just make this very, very, very plain.
Full American support for clearing them out.
Yeah. At this point, now, this obviously predates this point, but obviously the viscera of the genocide and the just absolute horrors that we have all been exposed to over the past 15, 16 months, I feel very comfortable saying that if you support Israel, you are not just a political enemy. You are an enemy of humanity at this point. If you support the Israeli regime, you are an enemy of humanity, which has broad implications, which means Donald Trump is an enemy of humanity. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is an enemy of humanity. Tulsi Gabbard, enemy of humanity. Kash Patel, enemy of humanity. You have no humanity if you support Israel, period. Which means I do not want to hear about collaboration with this administration at all, just as Anthony Blinken is an enemy of humanity, and Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, and Doug Emhoff, and whatever band of marauders they would have put in high places.
And Kamala Harris, who emphatically promised to keep arming Israel. Emphatically promised.
Yes, exactly. So they are enemies of humanity. And the mature response to this is to organize. And how do you organize? You organize workers who have common class interests, and you make, as part of that worker organization, an anti-war and anti-genocide demand. And that is why I support Workers Strike Back as strongly as I do. Are they the end-all, be-all of organizations? Are they going to take over the government? No, we're talking about a small grassroots thing. But they'll partner with other organizations. We will build it like that. Now you say, well, how long is that going to take? Well, it's not going to take as long as trying to work within this system with any of these people. These people are enemies of the human race. If you are against Palestine, you are an enemy of humanity, period.
Yep.
All right. Let's move. All right, let's go.
That's very well said.
Well said.
I need one of those Keaton buttons.
Yeah, you need one of those good point, Charles, to let me know the segment's wrapped.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Yeah, indeed. Nocturnal Human. Sorry, we got that one already. China shill. This judicial game is the same shit that Republicans have played for the last 2 decades, but now it's bad because it backfired on them. Well, yeah, of course. You always tout the judiciary when you're the minority party. That's why there is a judicial branch. The whole point of the judicial branch is to protect the interests of the minority party, because the minority party, by definition, does not have the numbers necessary to represent itself in that moment. So the way you protect the rights of the minority is by putting in place a branch of government that is not directly accountable to the people in that way. Now, I think there should be term limits, because I think it can reach extreme lengths where a guy puts a Supreme Court justice on the bench when the guy's 42, and then that guy lives to be 90. Now you're stuck with the implications of an administration from 50 years ago, where the politics of that moment can be totally different. So, yeah, I mean, I think it could be moderated. That's a different conversation. That's not the conversation. Do they have the right to do their job? Right. Exactly. Excuse me.
And if they don't, who does?
Right. And if they don't, who does? Exactly. Maybe roaring crowd cheered as the Falcons welcomed 80 Guard members who unfurled an American flag across the Georgia Dome's turf. In memos included in the report, the Pentagon said the payments were part of its recruitment campaigns, but it has since banned the practice, and according to Flake, the NFL has called on its teams to stop taking money for patriotic salutes. Americans across the country should be deeply disappointed that many of the ceremonies honoring troops at professional sporting events are not actually being conducted out of a sense of patriotism, but for profit in the form of millions in taxpayer dollars going from the Department of Defense to wealthy pro-sports franchises, McCain said in a statement. Fans should have confidence that their hometown heroes are being honored because of their honorable military service, not a marketing ploy. Now, that process was discontinued, but the effects of that, of course, in sports, especially the NFL, remain felt to this day. Don't forget, it was just 1 year after that Colin Kaepernick's contract expired with the San Francisco 49ers, and he went into free agency and would not get hired. He was one of the premier quarterbacks in the league, and for taking a knee to protest police brutality, was not hired again. And you did see viewership drop over that next year. You did see a lot of conservatives boycott the NFL. The jingoism that has been attached to sports in general really went into overdrive post 9/11, started with the New York Yankees World Series in October 2001, where the famous footage of George W. Bush coming out and throwing the first pitch in the World Series. The Yankee games still sing God Bless America in the 7th inning, believe it or not. Carlos Delgado, a great first baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays, played for the Mets later in his career, I believe. He famously refused to stand for God Bless America in 2004 to protest the Iraq and Afghanistan war. He got a lot of shit for that. So sports is one of these realms where you really don't see any kind of activism emerge. The whole point of sports is the circuses. These are the bread and the circuses, right? So you really don't see these kinds of protests emerge at sporting events very often. So good on this guy. He does now have a pretty good Instagram following because of this, so that's great. 73,000 followers. Go check him out. FFF_Zulkarnain. Go give him a follow because he earned it.
Yeah, this is the thing. People say, like with Kaepernick and that kind of thing, that it's not the appropriate place for politics. And I am inclined to agree with that. But there were already politics there, as you demonstrate.
Right. Exactly.
You had government-funded politics as part of it. So get all the politics out. Don't have the flyovers with the jets. Don't have the God Bless America. Don't have it. That's politics. Look, for me personally, you're a sports fan. I'm not. Part of what I don't like about sports is, I mean, for my whole life and before, it always had that vibe. Like, I don't like it. I don't like the Kaepernick, that's much later. My experience of sports is that. God bless them. Yeah, I'm an American. Like, yeah. It's all it always struck me as tribal primate monkey bullshit Like it like to be in the stands. Like, man, I never wanted any part of it. I never wanted any part of it. It always struck me as this is primate psychology at its stupidest.
Yeah. Well, that is certainly a take. But yeah. In any case, good on him for bringing some consciousness to that event. It was well done. All right. Let's move on. Eric Rousseau, Obama uses political capital to enrich big healthcare insurance. Yes, indeed. Nocturnal Human, I've personally heard from Republicans since Obama was president that they believe democracy is fascism, the old argument that California and New York would dictate everything. China Shell, thank you for calling out this crypto-fascist nonsense that has been brewing since 9/11 that a lot of the alt media seems to uncritically repeat because they also hate Democrats. Well, yeah, I mean, look, the technology comes into play because people get, I think, they are able to conjure up this artificial sense of empowerment, right, through the technology, right? They really feel like they have a voice. They really feel like what they say means something because, to an extent, they're right. Like, they're able to interact, right? They are able to converse. They are able to build a presence. But, that could also be a trap. And in this case, when you look at, there's a great video essay that went kind of viral recently. I forget I think it's called The Blonde Politics was the name of the channel that put it out. I forget what it was called. I will have a link to it. We'll share it next time. We might even do a segment on it because it's a fairly small channel, but it got like almost 2 million views because it did really well. Which kind of lays out a lot of the Curtis Yarvin stuff and the Vance stuff that Russ, you talked about, you touched upon in the last segment there.
Yeah, I think we're going to be getting into that quite a lot.
Yeah, that's got to become kind of unavoidable, I think.
Yes.
Noah Goop, James Carville's voice. Why don't you take a Whitney Webb black pill and stick it up your ass and take it out and suck on it? There you go. Thank you, Noah Goop. Let's see here. Society has regressed so far back that I doubt we ever changed. There's the same atmosphere as the early 2000s with anti-immigrant Muslim sentiment. And there are people who were anti-Bush but pro-this. Good point. Good point. That is a good point. Like, they've shed the sort of neocon pretense, but those same sort of instincts seem to be emerging again. Right. Good point, John Schill. Modern day puppet, says Doc Durkin. Elon might be the richest man on paper in stock speculation, but Tesla sales continue tanking worldwide. He's not so financially solvent upon review. Now, I mean, his net worth seems to be pretty good. He seems to be doing all right to me. Trump essentially needed that $100 million from Adelson to stay financially solvent. He's very much a puppet of his backers and donors, albeit a stubborn and kicking one. Thank you, Dr. Durkin. Appreciate that very much.
The guy who pulled out Netanyahu's chair like the head waiter at Le Cirque is not a big, strong alpha male. Essentially a puppet.
Right. Exactly. Brad Gilbert, TDS is now becoming Trump denial syndrome. Good one. I like that one. Yes, I gave that one a heart. That's how much I like it. Guy, thanks for the $2. Trump is Hitler, Bibi is Himmler. Thank you. Jeff Gomes, if you are okay with the illegal overthrow and annexation of Hawaii, doesn't that make you a Nazi? Or are you a Nazi only if you're okay with Gaza getting illegally overthrown and annexed? You're really putting me on the spot about Hawaii, aren't you? Really want comment on Hawaii?
I mean, look, personally, I am not aware of them having gone on a genocidal campaign in Hawaii. They might have. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say I've never delved into the history of Hawaii in that way. I think, the general point, we do recognize the genocide against our Native Americans as one of the great crimes of history.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's quite the own.
I mean, like I said, I'm not familiar with it in that way. You just sent one last super chat, but I mean, I would very easily say that if those were the facts. Justice is moving to Germany. Yes, good point, Janice Anderson. Appreciate that. Wasim Garani, pardon me. I'm hearing that King Abdullah, the British King of Jordan, just clucked to Trump regarding displacing Gazans like MAGA. What will the Jordanians do about it? Did that just break? If that just broke, that's news to me. The bigger question, though, still remains, what do the Palestinians do about it? I
Well,
mean, they are not.
They said from the beginning they weren't going to accept it, right?
Jordan has said that. Now he's saying they just cucked to Trump. We'll have to look that up.
They cucked to him.
Yeah, that they backed down and agreed. If that's the case, the question remains: what do the Palestinians do about it? Because they're the ones saying they're not going to leave. Funbad says, any ideas to stop this fascist takeover? I wish I had a better one. But, I do think at this point, the idea that a majoritarian movement is going to succeed at displacing these people through democratic means is a fantasy. I think it's going to take a strong and militant labor movement, not of 100 million people. I've been emailing some general strike activists now because we're trying to build a team up for this worker strike back conference. And they said in an email to me, they said, and I don't have any reason to doubt this, I can't confirm this, but they said an effective general strike requires participation from about 3.5% of the population, right? That you can bring the system to a halt if you mobilize 3.5% of people to stop work. And so what's that? In America, 12, 15 million? Like, that's the goal. Like, the idea that we're going to engage in the democratic process and run a candidate who's going to go out and make the case to America. No, this country is washed in that way. Yep. The country on a whole is washed. Look at them cheering like morons for this DOGE bullshit.
Yeah.
It's
Maxine
washed.
Waters was just yelling at a greeter at Walmart. I heard.
Right, and then look at the state of the opposition.
Right.
The state of the opposition doesn't even understand fully what they're up against. For Hakeem Jeffries to come up, we were going to maybe do this, and now that I think about it more, I wish we had. Maybe we will on Thursday in some way. That clip is old by then. But saying we're in the minority so we have no leverage, that's missing the point.
Right.
When the executive overreaches in this way, even if you had the majority in the House, there's nothing you could do.
Right.
What are you going to do? Trump has veto power over any legislation, right? So you can't pass legislation to check his power because you don't have a veto-proof majority. And even if you did, the project of these people, of the Elons, is to tear down, not to build up. So in other words, you're not going to overwhelm that with more spending. They just are going to slash and burn. What is there to stop them from doing that?
Right.
If they just violate the gentleman's agreement that says we're going to play by the rules, right?
Yeah, no. Apparently, when you elect someone, they have unchecked power. Nobody ever knew that before, but it's suddenly that is the great legal insight of the brilliant minds on X.
Exactly. All right. Why don't we keep going? We'll keep moving.
What's next?
This is one that gets my blood boiling.
What's next?
The Social Security.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so listen, you folks have nothing to worry about. You have nothing to worry about. Donald Trump has assured everybody that Social Security is not going to be touched.
Security will not be touched. It'll only be strengthened. We have illegal immigrants on Social Security, and we're going to find out who they are and take them out. We have illegal immigrants in other Medicare. We've found a lot of bad people, a lot of people that shouldn't be on, that were put on through California. A lot of them come out of California. We're not going to stand for that. So we're going to strengthen our Social Security, etc. We're not going to touch it other than to make it stronger. But we have people that shouldn't be on, and those people we have to weed out. Most of them, or many of them so far, have been illegal immigrants. They shouldn't even be in the country.
All right, so that is very reassuring. So he doesn't want to touch Social Security, except that apparently there's an enormous problem, not a random case here and there. There's an enormous problem of illegal immigrants without the benefit of a Social Security number somehow managing to get Social Security. It's an enormous problem. It's an enormous problem. That is their only concern. Republicans have always been very honest when they express their intentions about Social Security, as we will see. So let's so this article breaks down some of the history of Republicans. This was compiled by the AFL-CIO in regards to Social Security. So let's look at some of the lowlights. 1935, almost all Republicans in Congress opposed the creation of Social Security. 1939, 75% of Republicans in the Senate try to kill legislation providing Social Security benefits to dependents and survivors, as well as retired workers. 1950, 79% of the House and 89% of the Senate Republicans vote against disability insurance to defeat it. 1956, 86% of Republicans in the Senate oppose disability insurance. Let them sell pencils, they called it, the Let them sell pencils Act. Program approved nonetheless. 1964, Republican presidential candidate Barry Goldwater and future President Ronald Reagan both suggest that Social Security be made voluntary. Now, I am sure that Barry Goldwater, when he spoke about Social Security, expressed that to potential voters.
Social Security is a contract between the federal government and you. I don't believe in breaking contracts, and I have never at any time advocating doing away with Social Security. Now, what I am concerned about, though, is the fact that you, all of us, paying our money in, paying our dollars into Social Security, when we get to the age to get it back, we're not going to get our dollar back. This is what I'm trying to talk about in Social Security. I'm trying to get the older people and the younger people to realize that if this kind of wasteful expenditure continues in our government, that when it comes time for them to get their Social Security, they're not going to do too well. And I don't think you have to go further than to ask the recipient today of Social Security if they're living very high off the hog, and they're not.
You see, Barry Goldwater doesn't want to get rid of Social Security. He's really worried that you're not going to get your Social Security. That's his only concern. And remember, he's saying this at a time when the country's demographics were very different, when you had more than enough younger workers paying into the trust fund to pay for Social Security, as far as the eye could see. So what he's talking about here, that, oh, we're spending too much money, just absolute bullshit in that historical moment, just absolute nonsense. 1965, 93% of Republicans in House and 62% in Senate vote to kill Medicare. 77, 58% of Senate votes against amendment to provide semi-annual increases. Again in 77, 88% of Republicans in the House and 63% in the Senate vote against an increase in Social Security payroll tax needed to keep the system solvent. 1981, President Reagan proposes $35 billion in Social Security cuts over the next 5 years. The cuts would have included the elimination of student benefits, lump sum death benefits, and a retroactive elimination of the $122 minimum benefit for 3 million recipients. Congress ultimately enacted $24 billion of the proposed cuts. Again in 1981, the Reagan administration begins a wholesale review of the Social Security disability rolls, resulting in over 560,000 eligibility investigations in 1982, 360,000 more than the year before. Ultimately, at least 106,000 families were removed from the rolls. Still, he was on a roll in 81 here. 99% of Republicans in House and 98% in Senate vote for legislation containing $22 billion in Social Security and Medicare. Now, look, I don't want to get too personal here, but I'm going to tell you something, because I know you're going to have, probably inspired by our favorite author, A. Chud. You're going to get people saying, see, but those people who got purged from the rolls, see, they found fraud in the system. You know one of the people who got purged from the rolls? My mother, who was disabled from birth, got purged from those rolls. Had to borrow money from my grandfather until after months of fighting, she finally got her funding restored. So I have some personal experience of what the consequences of these policies were.
Yeah, and these numbers can appear deceptively small because don't forget, these are 1981 dollars. So I just put it into a calculator just so I could make this point, because $35 billion 1981 dollars accounted for inflation today is $120 billion. So it's actually quite a drastic cut.
I used to go home for lunch because I lived close to the school. The day Reagan got shot, I was walking to school, and the crossing guard said, "Reagan got shot." I said, "Good." I was 10 years old. I think back on that now. I'm like, God, that must have been creepy for that crossing.
Yeah, 10-year-old.
Yeah. 81, Reagan administration proposes a 3-month delay in 1982 cost of living increases. Again in 81, Reagan administration proposes $200 billion in Social Security cuts between 82 and 1990. The cuts include a reduction in early retirement benefit, tightened disability eligibility standards, delay in the 1982 cost of living adjustment, and a 10% eventual reduction in benefits for all new retirees. The U.S. Senate repudiated the president's proposals by a vote of 96-0. Now 82, still at it. President Reagan and Senate Republicans proposed $40 billion in benefit cuts over 3 fiscal years. 85, Reagan administration backs attempts by Republican Senate leadership to eliminate the 1986 Social Security COLA. Vice President Bush cast the tie-breaking vote to eliminate COLA. That's the cost of living adjustment.
Yep.
House defeats it. It was never enacted. Okay, so Reagan, I am sure, in 1984, he was very honest about his views and intentions with Social Security, just like Donald Trump, I'm sure, is being very honest and forthcoming about his thoughts on Social Security.
Let's lay it to rest once and for all. I told you never would I do such a thing. But I tell you also now, Social Security has nothing to do with the deficit.
Wow.
Social Security is totally funded by the payroll tax levied on employer and employee. If you reduce the outgo of Social Security, that money would not go into the general fund to reduce a deficit. It would go into the Social Security Trust Fund. So Social Security has nothing to do with balancing a budget or erasing or lowering the deficit.
So not only did Ronald Reagan promise he wouldn't cut Social Security, even though by that time he had repeatedly been trying to cut Social Security, he says that it has nothing to do with the deficit, so I guess he was just motivated by pure evil. He's not even saying it has anything to do with the deficit. I'm just an evil bastard.
Right.
I just don't like the idea of old people eating human food. I want them eating Alpo.
Right.
So yeah, wow. Okay. All right. So that's what he had to say about Social Security. Very different from his actions behind the scenes. He was obviously so hostile to it that he constantly was trying to make cuts to Social Security in one way or another. 2005, a labor-led fight against privatization saved Social Security for the time being. 2006, President George W. Bush once again introduces privatization of Social Security in his 2007 budget. Now, to be fair, I want to make it clear this is coming from the AFL-CIO, so they only talked about Republicans, the articles from 2006. That's why it doesn't go any further than that. And, yeah, they continued. Paul Ryan wanted to privatize Medicare. But, hey, Joe Biden, this is when he had 3/4 of a brain, not just half a brain, as the Joe Biden that just presided over the country did. Here's Joe Biden talking about Social Security.
When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. And I not only tried it once, I tried it twice, I tried it a third time, and I tried it a fourth time.
Very proud of it.
Somebody has to tell me in here how we're going to do this hard work without dealing with any of those sacred cows. I meant every single solitary thing.
That's Bernie's good friend Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Good friend Joe Biden, who he didn't have the balls to call out on that until it was too late to save him, and even then very mildly. And hey, not just creepy Uncle Joe. Clinton wanted to privatize Social Security. According to 3 former top administration officials, President Clinton was strongly considering the partial privatization of Social Security prior to his impeachment in 1999. The revelation was contained in a paper delivered by David Wilcox, an Assistant Treasury Secretary, Douglas Emmeldorf, a Deputy Assistant Treasury Secretary, and Jeffrey Lieberman, I dated that guy's daughter, an aide with the National Economic Council. Different Jeffrey Lieberman. So, we don't have to get into the details. So, no, that guy was a filmmaker, actually. Barack Obama once proposed cutting Social Security. Now, there's just a little side note. You want to see how they manufacture consent for the idea that progressives have some influence in the Democratic Party? So this is the party line right here. This was Ryan Grimm was one of the reporters on this back in 2016. Here's what changed his mind, and it goes on to talk about how progressives changed his mind. Business Insider, how liberals killed the grand bargain, right? So the proto squad stopped Barack Obama from cutting a deal with Republicans. No, actually, the Republicans killed the deal. This is from 2014. In 2011, in 2012, and in 2013, Obama was willing to adopt a chained consumer price index, which would result in lower payouts of Social Security benefits over time. He would have protected poor seniors. Republicans had long demanded it, citing the sustainability of the nation's retirement entitlements. I want to point out Barry Goldwater, at the height of our economic prosperity, and when the young workers paying into the system to retirees was much better than it is now, he was making the same claims that we had to cut the entitlements because of spending. Obama was willing to do it as part of a grand bargain. His condition was to scale back tax breaks that benefit the wealthy. He made the case to House Speaker John Boehner in 2011 and 2012, and then over and over to Senate Republicans in 2013. Republicans didn't bite. They decided that raising taxes on the wealthy by closing tax expenditures was too much to ask. The GOP refusal to agree to a deal is the reason why Obama's Social Security proposal isn't law. In fact, though he's not including it in his budget, Obama says the offer is still on the table. This was in 2014. So if the Republicans had agreed to it, there would have been Social Security cuts then. So I don't want to say it's just the Republicans. The Democrats have played in this sandbox too. So here's Elon proposing $2 trillion by 2026. Now, I don't know if this was before he came back. It seems like he said he couldn't do $2 trillion, but then I think he recommitted to it. Elon Musk's ambitious push to reinvent government spending with Silicon Valley powerhouses. Now, there are very few places in the federal budget where you could get anywhere near the kind of money you would need to get to make $2 trillion in cuts. This is the 2023 budget. All right, so you got 11% Medicaid, 11% Medicare. You got 8% of is interest on the debt. You got defense is 12, non-defense discretionary 15. Social Security is 20. So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that is 42% of the federal budget. That is one of the only places where you could get the kind of money that he's talking about. I don't even know that you could really get that. Well, you couldn't get that all from defense, all of that money from defense.
Right.
So let's see here. This is the 2024 proposed budget. Final budget probably landed pretty close to that. So you can see in this pie chart, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, basically the same thing, right? Interest on the debt, defense. Okay, so really, if you want that kind of money, you kind of got to get to that. However, they got a problem. They got a big problem, and this is the same problem that Republicans who have been trying to kill this since it was proposed in 1935. They've been trying to kill it since it was first put before them. It's wildly popular. It is wildly popular. Now, this is a poll from relatively recently, 2023. I wouldn't think it's changed drastically since then. Wide opposition to Social Security and Medicare cut. So in order to pay for Medicare, 58% want to increase taxes on households earning over $400,000 a year to pay for Medicare. That's not even about Social Security. That's just Medicare. Raising the eligibility age for Medicare benefits from 65 to 67. Only 15% of people support that. 70% oppose it. Increasing Medicare premiums. 67% opposed, 10% for. Raising the eligibility age for Social Security benefits from 67 to 70. 10% for it, 75% against it. Reducing the size of Social Security benefits. 6% for, 79% against. So that is what they call in the business a political stinker. That is why it hasn't been done, even though you have all of these Republicans. Since 1935, it's almost 100 years they've been opposing Social Security.
Almost as unpopular as trans shows in Bangladesh.
Oh, well, the IRI is trying to change that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so here's the other place that maybe you could go for some of that money. Haven't heard much about that. Now, this is my prediction, and I want to say this so that aficionados of Chud don't come after me when it happens. I'm betting they're going to go to the Pentagon. They're going to point out some weapons programs that are antiquated and they're spending too much on. They're not actually going to cut any of the Pentagon budget. They're going to divert that money to Palantir, to Tesla, and to the rest of their criminal friends. But in the meantime, they'll be telling people they're cleaning up corruption at the Pentagon and waste at the Pentagon. They're going to re-divert that money to themselves. But for now, you would think if you're trying to root out corruption, you're trying to root out waste, you'd make a beeline for the Pentagon, right? Pentagon can account for 63% of nearly $4 trillion in assets. You would think you'd go right there. Pentagon fails 7th audit in a row. Beeline for the Pentagon, but no, that's not what they did. Instead, what they're doing is rifling through these government agencies, the Department of the Treasury, Department of Agriculture, Department of State, when that total civilian federal agencies that they're setting their teenage squad of crackerjack detectives on is $303.2 billion, whereas the Department of Defense gets $456 billion. You'd think they'd go there first, but for some reason they didn't go there first. Oh, maybe that's the reason. Elon is a defense contractor. Elon gets a lot of money from the Department of Defense. Maybe that's why he didn't go there first. He's not getting a lot of money for Bangladesh trans dance performances, but he is getting a lot of money from the Department of Defense. So that might be why he hasn't stopped by to say hello with a fruit basket yet. So, hey, people are overwhelmingly against messing with these programs. So how are you going to get them on your side? How are you going to get them to agree to these cuts that Republicans have been trying to make for 90 years, trying to shut this down? You tell people, somebody's getting away with something. There's a lot of fraud in the system. Now maybe you can have a conversation, right? So it's not the Pentagon. It's not the Pentagon, according to Elon, that has failed 7 audits, that has what is it, 66% of its 63% of its $4 trillion in assets that it can't account for. It's not there. It is Medicare and Medicaid. According to Elon, yeah, this is where the big money fraud is happening. In response to a headline, DOGE aides search Medicare agency payment systems for fraud. Not the Pentagon. It's Medicare and Medicaid, which are wildly popular and people don't want touched. Musk team accesses Medicare, Medicaid records. And this, he just tweeted this out yesterday. At this point, I am 100% certain that the magnitude of the fraud in federal entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, disability, etc., exceeds the combined sum of every private scam you've ever heard by far. By far, it's not even close. It's more than the Nigerian prince scams, more than any scam you ever heard of. Now, this is an old Republican trick when they want to cut something. They will tell you that somebody's getting something for free. A pioneer in this technique was the Gipper himself with his famous welfare queen formulation, which I just learned researching this. He didn't actually say those words. That was a newspaper invention, welfare queen. But the effect of it was there in his words.
Yeah, kind of like
Chicago,
let them eat cake.
They found a woman who holds the record. She used 80 names, 30 addresses, 15 telephone numbers to collect food stamps, Social Security, veterans benefits for 4 non-existent deceased veterans' husbands, as well as welfare. Her tax-free cash income alone has been running $150,000 a year.
And he didn't.
Okay, so now how do you get people up in arms? It's a very basic instinct, right? Oh, somebody's getting away with something while you're working hard. This person is a layabout. So this is what they're doing. Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, wildly popular programs, wildly popular. How are you going to get people to agree to let you start messing with those systems? Well, now you got them all primed about, oh, look what we're finding at the Department of the Treasury. Look at all of this waste. They've already got people primed up to just be completely uncritical of any claims that they make. Now they got you good and lubed up, right? This is the end game. Now they're going to jam the big dick in your ass. They got you lubed up with the U.S. aid and all that, right? That's what this is really all about. They've been trying to do this for 90 years. They've got you just knee-jerk. Yeah, there's waste, there's fraud. How many? Okay, suppose there are immigrants getting Social Security. How many do you think that is? Like, how common a problem do you really think that is?
Of course.
But once they get people screaming, yeah, we got to stop the fraud and waste, now they can do what they've always wanted to do. And you know who warned you that they always wanted to do this? The late, the great George Carlin. 20 years ago this year was this monologue. We're just going to play a little bit of it.
Lobbying to get what they want.
Pause it. That's the wrong one. You got this one. That's the copyright.
Oh,
yeah.
Whoops.
They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. And by the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you.
Yep. He was a prophet. He warned you about this 20 years ago. And they've been trying. Right? Right after he did that, George Bush made his proposal for privatizing Social Security. He was going to give it to Wall Street. That's what they want to do. Every technique, every tactic, every bit of propaganda they've tried to convince people to get behind cutting Medicare and Social Security has failed. So now they're going welfare queen. Only now it's going to be the immigration queen.
Exactly.
You got all these immigrants who are getting the Social Security, and just like people without even understanding what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is, all of a sudden they're experts talking about what a terrible organization it was because Humpty Dumpty said so on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan uncritically said, "Really? Tell me more." Now everybody, oh yeah, no, we got to, Elizabeth Warren started it, so Pocahontas, well, it must be a terrible organization, even though I know absolutely nothing about this organization that gave over $20 million back to consumers. $20 billion, actually, back to consumers. I know nothing about it, but it's terrible. Now, this is a little harder because people know what Social Security is. They know what Medicare is, but they've never had so many people primed to cut their own throats.
Yep.
Ever.
And by the time they figure it out, it'll be too late. It'll be too late. If you're collecting disability and you are cheering on what's going on now at DOGE, it's going to be too late.
Yep.
By the time some 19-year-old Afrikaner pool boy decides you don't need that disability anymore, it's going to be too late. It's going to be gone.
Right.
It's going to be gone.
Right.
And Trump doesn't have to be reelected. He's going to try and pass the ball to J.D. Vance. The Democrats are in shambles. Who is going to stop them at this point? Who is going to stop them at this point? They have tricked you into cheering for your own destruction, into cheering for your own demise. And this kind of grievance is what they use every single time. And this time, that grievance is being amplified by the very platform owned by the very man who is in a position to make these cuts. How you do not see this as a clear and present danger to your own well-being is beyond me, unless you're fucking rich. If you're rich, I understand it.
Sure.
If you're a working person, you have to be incredibly self-destructive to cheer this on. Incredibly self-destructive. This is obviously the Holy Grail. This is obviously what they wanted to do
for
all
90 years.
along. For almost 100 years at this point. Elon Musk's political hero is not Donald Trump. It is Javier Milei. What's the poverty rate in Argentina now? 53%. He idolizes the man. That is what they intend on doing here. These people mean you harm, severe harm. And to see people just propagandized to the point where they could cheer this on, it is pathetic. It is really pathetic. I mean, this country is done. It's washed. That's what George Carlin said shortly before he died. The country is finished. It's over. And it is. It is. There's no pulling back from the brink. You know, there is no majoritarian solution to this through the democratic system at this point. You know, you can make wins with an organized workforce, just like the dock workers did. You know, Trump gave them the win on the AI because he felt he had to. Right? They need a system to preside over.
Well,
the only way to do this is to shut the whole thing down.
That's it.
Shut the whole thing down. That's it. You have no other choice in this moment. You know, I was talking with a friend of ours who we've had on the show many times, who was talking about liberal constitutionalism. If you're going to be on the right side of history at this moment, that's what you have to advocate for. And I said that and that alone is a non-starter. That's what
how we got here.
That's what this whole past decade has really proven, that the Democrats ran on maintaining liberal constitutionalism for its own sake. And what did people do? They traded that in the hope of getting something to eat, as FDR said in the clip we played last time. So that ship has sailed. But it is so mind-boggling to me that people are this submissive to these people. It has always been, since I was a kid, I didn't understand it. Since I was a kid. Don't you watch, when you're a kid and you watch a cartoon or a movie or something, the rich, greedy prick is always the bad guy in the movie.
Not anymore.
Right. The rich, greedy prick is always the bad guy. Or what? You lost sight of that? What? You got convinced into thinking, no, they're the good guys. They mean you well. And it's the beggar who's the bad guy. It's the poor person who's the bad guy. It just requires, such a perversion of your understanding of the world and of like the human experience. I mean, it is really a pathetic thing to see, and now we're seeing it in overdrive.
It's a society of very broken people.
Yes.
And this is what we've been warning about ever since they sabotaged the Sanders campaign. Whatever you think of Bernie Sanders, those basic social democratic policies were the only thing that might have stopped this. Anyone who was really paying attention knew this, what we had was not sustainable, that the country was going to break populist left. And if you didn't let them do that, it was going to break populist right. And after what happened in 2016, it seemed pretty clear it was going to go populist right because the system could live with that. That's part of what's, I think, a lot of people don't understand about this current moment. In the end, what Trump is doing, yeah, there's a wing of the oligarchy that doesn't like the way they're going about it. They don't like the aesthetics of it. But in the end, they'll take it over social democratic reforms. In the end is what they're about. Now, you want to see how neoliberalism primed people for this. Going back to what you're saying, the rich person's the bad guy. Not anymore. When I used to do my tours of Central Park, you stop by the Dakota where John Lennon was shot. And I always made the point, one of the reasons John Lennon is dead is because he didn't have bodyguards. He didn't have bodyguards because he felt it was classist. He felt it was pompous to walk around with bodyguards. Today, you got a show like Entourage, which it's not on the air anymore, but that celebrates it. What if you tried to put a show like that on the air in like 1972? Everybody would be like, this guy's an asshole. This guy's, I hope something bad happens to this guy. The idea that you would have shows that celebrate people like that celebrate that kind of opulence. Now, you could say there was a hypocrisy of these very wealthy rock stars who drove around in Rolls Royces pretending to be of the people, but that's a different question. It shows you something about where people's minds were at, what their expectations were. When I was growing up, you had TV series that celebrated union leaders. Carl Malden was in a show called Skag. Norma Ray was a hit at the movies. It's people have been conditioned largely or partially through the liberal value system to celebrate wealth and to delegate the expression of leftism to lifestyle brand choices, aligning yourself with certain boutique causes, with certain aesthetic expressions. But the celebration of untrammeled wealth has been pushed by the elites of our society, and one wing of that elites eventually wound up losing to the other, but they did more to prime people for celebrating people like Elon than Elon has.
Right. Exactly. All right. We are going to pause now for a quick word from our supporters. So, folks, if you like what we do here and you want to help us do more of it, you can go to patreon.com/do dissidents. You can go to dodissidents.substack.com, or you can join our locals, dodissidents.locals.com. For those watching on Rumble right now, there are 1,200 of you there. Shout out to the Rumblers. You can click that bright red join button underneath the screen. That helps us keep the lights on here, keep the show afloat. We offer exclusive perks to members. You get 2 bonus live streams per month, 1 content and call-in stream, and then 1 movie club stream that's call-in as well. You also get call-in access to our post-show Q&As every Sunday night, which are exclusively held on Rumble. You get your name up in lights here. You also get live stream access to all of our pre-recorded full-length interviews. So we do make it worth your while, and you guys are absolutely the backbone of the show. We could not do the show without our members. So if you would like to chip in $5 a month for those perks, plus the good karma and goodwill of supporting independent media, you can go to dodissidents.locals.com, or like I said, if you're watching on Rumble, you can click that bright red join button underneath the video player. Wasim Garani says, also, Arab reporter asked Trump about West Bank annexation in front of the king. Trump, it'll work out well. King, nothing, just sat there. Okay. All right. That looks like some video maybe for Thursday. Philip Blair, thanks for the $10. Jill Stein and Butch Ware won the popular vote in a few places. They were right. We need to demand candidates outside the red, blue, royal, purple duopoly get to debate along with ranked choice voting. Yeah, I'm for that, but like I said,
we got to think outside that system.
You got to think outside that system. Look, you're not convincing a majority of the people in the short term that this is not good for them. I mean, you're just not. The people resentment is a very powerful thing. That's why Reagan was as popular as he was. It's very easy to turn people's ire.
Or Nixon until Watergate. Nixon
on the scapegoat. Or Nixon, too.
Landslide. What did he win? 49 states, Nixon?
Yes,
72?
yeah, he won 49 against McGovern. That's right. So, yeah, I mean, that's a very, very powerful thing. And people tend to go into retreat mode, you know. People will definitely cut off their nose to spite their face if they think they can hurt someone else who deserves to feel pain in the process. Right. And that's what you have right now. And it is really, really pathetic. And it's especially pathetic to see the lack of interest in pushing back at all. The Democrats, absolutely pathetic. And a lot of independents are just either going along because it gives them a short-term thrill to see some people they don't like get a certain comeuppance, or they've just resigned to it. They said, well, I guess this is what's happening now, and so there's no point. There's no point in pushing back. Let's see. King Abdullah Clucking Part 3. Trump is working to create peace and prosperity in the Middle East. Oh, so he's giving him a tongue bath there. Deadeye Blackmire. Thank you for those updates. Appreciate that, Wasim. Deadeye Blackmire. He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. Gaza is not like the mountains of Afghanistan. GDNPB. Well, I guess we'll find out if you two are right that we should have elected the only other choice. We had an elected Kamala. That's not what we said.
We never said that.
Sam as I am. Trump is Hitler at an age of better marketing to stupider people and a lot of so-called smarter people who are complicit in creating the opportunity. No, it just takes some maturity to understand when you're fucked, when the no road leads to a good place. It takes some maturity to understand that.
Like if they had elected Harris, you would have just gotten here 4 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
What she was offering, what Biden offered, what Obama offered, what Clinton offered, all of that kind of politics led here. If it didn't lead here now, it would have led here in 4 years. You were going to get here.
Would have led here 4 years ago. It's not for the pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
The question is, what do you do? What are you going to do about it?
Right. Artie Blarty Fart Blast, thanks for the $7.99. Are the Palestinians like the 300 Spartans who inspired the Greek city-states to resist a rapacious empire? Well, we will find out, perhaps shortly, depending on how this next week or two goes. John Mango, thanks for the $5. DOGE should audit the DOD with all their missing money. Oh, wait, that's who pays Elon. Never mind. Yeah. They're talking about auditing them, and they're talking about trying to get them to pass an audit. They just failed an audit. They just were audited.
Yep.
You know, I have a feeling what Russell said is right. I think they will do some minor things around the edges. They'll shuffle some money around. Okay, now we did that. Okay, now let's go after all these people who say they're disabled, but they're really just too lazy to get off their ass and work. And they'll get all the morons out there to say, yeah, let's go after them. And then when their Social Security, and then when their disability is cut, they'll say, oh, no, not me. I really need it. Well, guess what? Like I said, Elon Musk's pool boy doesn't believe you that you need it. So you're screwed.
Well, that's what I mean when I say people are broken. People feel so powerless that, and this is what's so dangerous when you get an authoritarian movement that gets momentum. It sucks in all the people who feel they have no power, that they have no real control over their lives. And it gives them an illusion of power and belonging by connecting themselves to this bigger thing that they perceive. Look, Donald Trump understands this in terms of the branding. You're going to get tired of winning, right? Because these people feel like they're not winning. So now you're winning. How on earth? And hey, again, we're not fans of U.S. aid. Nobody on the left is. how is cutting U.S. aid helping you?
Right.
When I've asked people that, their answer is, I don't care if it's only $44,000 with the Politico thing. I don't want to see my taxpayer money wasted. Okay, so your answer is it's giving you an illusion of regaining power over your government because you don't feel you have any. It's not. The answer is it's not helping you at all.
Right.
That's
it's
the
just,
answer.
It's emotionally satisfying.
It's giving you an emotional satisfaction because you don't feel like you can get anything better than that. Or really, I mean, the tacit promise is after we do all this, your life's going to be great. And I don't think it will be. We're going to see. I have an immigration segment where I will point out where some things may improve for some people in some ways, and the left really needs to have a better answer to that than everyone with a problem with immigration as a racist, but we'll get to that.
All right, folks. So this next segment is one kind of a story in two acts, if you will. Beginning yesterday morning, Mayor Adams to top commissioners, don't criticize Trump, don't interfere with immigration enforcement. Mayor Eric Adams gathered his top commissioners and officials early Monday to give marching orders under the new administration. Don't criticize President Trump, don't interfere with immigration enforcement, and trust the mayor, multiple sources told the city. The city is the name of this outlet. That's why it's in big capital letters. Adams scheduled the approximately hour-long meeting, which was held at the municipal building late Friday, after days of confusion over guidance on what to do if immigration and customs enforcement agents arrive at city buildings, including schools and hospitals. The mayor began the meeting Monday by asking his top officials how they felt and that they shouldn't be shy about sharing, sources told the city. After some people expressed their concerns and asked for clearer guidance from the mayor, Adams ordered them to stop complaining and to keep their heads down and refrain from criticizing President Donald Trump and trust that he will make sure the city doesn't get federal grants pulled, multiple people told the city. They were also ordered not to be critical of the president or federal government on social media. Trump has already threatened to pull federal funding for so-called sanctuary cities where laws or policies limit local government cooperation with immigration enforcement. New York City's laws allow cooperation with ICE only in limited instances involving people convicted of certain felonies or with a judicial warrant. Attendees spotted by the city entering the meeting included Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, Schools Chancellor Melissa Aviles Ramos, Health and Hospital CEO Dr. Mitchell Katz, Department of Social Services Commissioner Molly Wasso Park, and multiple deputy mayors. So here is Katie Honan from the city who was outside, and she tried catching up to some of these people on the way in. Here is Mayor Eric Adams.
Good morning, Mayor Adams. Good morning, guys. Good morning, DJ. Do you want to talk about this memo? Oh, who were you rooting for last night?
The winner.
Oh, always go with the winner. Do you want to express, there was some confusion about ICE protocol. Is that what this meeting's going to clear up? Hopefully people have a better understanding of what to do. Thank you.
Mom is the word.
I got more out of him.
Yeah. Mom is the word. On Sunday, Aviles Ramos released a video assuring parents, students, and school staff that any non-local law enforcement is not permitted inside school buildings. She declined to clarify or answer questions as she entered the meeting. So here's the first video that the Chancellor of Schools put out. We unequivocally stand with all children in our city, regardless of immigration statuses. We want to be clear, our policies have not changed.
Unequivocally stand with all children in our city, regardless of immigration status. We want to be very clear. Our policies have not changed. As always, non-local law enforcement is not permitted in any of our school buildings without a judicial warrant or unless there are exigent circumstances. Above all else, our promise to families remain the same. New York City Public Schools is committed to serving every student, regardless of immigration status, national origin, or religion. We encourage all parents to have their students continue to attend school.
Okay. So then Katie caught up with her on the way inside.
Good morning, Chancellor. My name's Katie. I'm a reporter with the city. I wanted to ask you, I know you released a video yesterday clarifying the ICE memo.
Sorry, Katie,
why did you walk back your comments on attendance dips? Sir, don't push me. Why did you walk back your comments on why attendance was low in January? Did the mayor's office reach out to you? Did City Hall reach out to you? Why won't you take press conferences and questions from reporters?
All right, so she's asking her there, you assured us ICE wasn't going to be welcome in the schools, but there's been an attendance dip. The implication there is, of course, people are not really buying that, so some people are keeping their kids home. Do you have any update? Mom was the word. Mom was the word, and we're going to kind of get an idea of why that is, I think, in a minute or two. Adams also told his top officials they needed to stop complaining about President Trump and move on because he was elected, which echoes what he's repeatedly shared in press briefings. The administration also on Monday released a new flow chart to help city employees know what to do when interacting with non-local law enforcement. This is part of updated guidance sent to city employees today on what to do about in-person interactions with non-local law enforcement like ICE. So you start out, can I see your ID? If the officer provides the ID, what is the purpose of the visit? If the officer is asking for an individual, do you have a warrant? Let them in if they have a warrant. If they don't have a warrant, say, I'm not authorized to let you in. I will call my counsel and you can speak with them. And then under that, it says, do not interfere. Now, if they don't have a valid ID, I'm not authorized to let you in without ID. If they enter anyway, call NYPD. So these are the guidelines that they are now putting out. The mayor has said he won't publicly criticize the president and has refused to criticize Trump's statements or actions when pressed by reporters. Trump said in December he would look at potentially pardoning Adams, whose federal corruption trial is set to begin in April. It's fueled speculation that the mayor is acting chiefly to obtain a pardon or dropped charges from the president, even as Trump threatened to withhold crucial funding from the city. Well, that speculation was certainly validated because later that day, top Justice Department official orders prosecutors to drop charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams. The AP reports the Justice Department on Monday, which, don't forget, that meeting that he held was Monday morning. So this all happened in less than a day.
Yep.
The Justice Department on Monday ordered federal prosecutors to drop corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, arguing in a remarkable departure from the long-standing norms that the case was interfering with the mayor's ability to aid the president's crackdown on illegal immigration. In a two-page memo obtained by the Associated Press, Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove told prosecutors in New York that they were directed to dismiss the bribery charges against Adams immediately. Bove said the order was not based on the strength of evidence in the case, but rather because it had been brought too close to Adams' re-election campaign and was distracting from the mayor's efforts to assist in the Trump administration's law and order priorities. The pending prosecution has unduly restricted Mayor Adams' ability to devote full attention and resources to the illegal immigration and violent crime, Bove wrote. The memo also ordered prosecutors in New York not to take additional investigative steps against the Democrat until after November's mayoral election, though it left open the possibility that charges could be refiled after that following a review. The intervention and reasoning that a powerful defendant could be too occupied with official duties to face accountability for alleged crimes marked an extraordinary deviation from longstanding Justice Department norms. Yeah, I would think so. That's like saying to prosecute the leader of basically what is essentially the capital of the world, New York City, the most significant city on earth, to prosecute the person who presides over that municipality for a crime would interfere with his ability to seek a second term presiding over this giant municipality, even though there is strong evidence that he is, in fact, a criminal. I mean, think of the warped thinking.
They're not even saying the evidence does not support prosecution.
No, they're not even coming up with a bullshit excuse.
So I by this logic, you should never prosecute public officials with responsibilities.
Right.
A prosecution would always interfere, presumably, with their ability to carry out their duties. So by this logic, nobody in office should really be prosecuted.
Right. So if someone in high office is a criminal, isn't that the whole point?
Is that a
Prosecuting
reason
them?
to remove
Isn't
them?
that a reason to prosecute them, to remove them from office if they're abusing their power and committing crimes? No, apparently it's the opposite. Apparently you can't prosecute criminals in high places because the fact that they're in high places means they have important work to do and they should be left alone to carry out that work, especially in this example when they're carrying out the work of enforcing law and order on behalf of Donald Trump. So yes, that does mark, as the AP writes, an extraordinary deviation from long-standing Justice Department norms. Public officials at the highest level of government are routinely investigated by the Justice Department, including President Donald Trump during his first term, without prosecutors advancing a claim that they should be let off the hook to attend to government service. An attorney for Adams, Alex Spiro, said the Justice Department's order had vindicated the mayor's claim of innocence. Well, it actually did not. It just said, never mind. He has work to do that's more important. Now, thankfully, the mayor and New York can put this unfortunate and misguided prosecution behind them, said Spiro, who, incidentally, has also represented Elon Musk. So, pretty blatant. We said this from the second that, Adams changed his tune on immigration. In fact, some people said that the reason Adams was being prosecuted in the first place was for criticizing Joe Biden, that there's too many immigrants. Remember when there was the theory put out there that now they're throwing the book at him because he's defending because he's speaking out against Joe Biden, rather, for flooding the city with illegal immigrants. He's creating a political headache for the president, and so they're throwing the book at him. Now, of course, he's having the charges dropped for the opposite reason. He's trying to give Trump a political win here, and apparently he's being rewarded for it. Now, the rub here is that Adams still has to run for re-election, and should he lose, he could very well face those charges. Like, they could very, very well open the books back up. Now, here is the other thing, and this kind of segues into the next segment. This now creates a real political test for the immigration issue in New York City, because Eric Adams is now going to basically do exactly what the Trump administration wants, and you're going to have New York City, Democratic city, vote yes or no, largely based on this issue. So now you're going to see this issue really put to a test in a way that it hasn't been before. But the last point I'll make about this is one more pat on the back to the Democratic primary voters who put this guy in charge of their city. You know, we've talked so much about how the Democratic Party, from the top down to the rank and file, my first real thesis when we started this show is that the problem with the party is the voters, the just utter mindlessness of the voters. They had options in that primary. They chose Eric Adams. Because of his toughness. And now here he is selling the city out to Donald Trump. We'll see what the price to be paid for that is. This is going to be in large part a referendum on this issue and his handling of this issue. It sets up a very interesting showdown in a place that votes heavily Democrat. We're going to see how this issue and Adams' handling of it impacts the campaign. And in a very personal way, does it impact Eric Adams? Because if Eric Adams loses, I don't think Trump feels any personal loyalty to the man. He could very well face charges again.
Yeah, New York is not left. New York is liberal.
Well, that's why I said it's a Democratic city, not a left city. Yeah.
Yes. All of the problems that have come home to roost for the Democrats are even more evident in New York than most places. Remember, New York You have he's like my arch nemesis. What the unibrow baby is for Lisa Simpson, that's what Cash Jordan is for me. So
Right.
for anyone who doesn't know, he just puts out absolute nonsense videos that play to people's need for that morality tale that New York is on the verge of collapse. And it's just absolute bullshit. 99% of what he says. But this vision that people have that New York is this city of out of control leftists, you have to misunderstand what leftism is to believe that. It's an extremely right-wing city that believes in abortion and gay marriage. It is the Democratic Party writ large. This is the city that gave the country Rudy Giuliani. This is the city that elected Michael Bloomberg as mayor. This is the city that had Pataki fairly recently for multiple terms. This is not, in any meaningful sense, a left city. Adams himself is a Republican.
Yeah.
He became a Democrat because Democrat registrations in New York City, last I heard, it's 4-1.
Right.
And yet, even so, Republicans have a history of doing well here. Bloomberg eventually called himself an independent, but he was a Republican.
Right.
He ran initially as a Republican. This is a money town dominated by Wall Street, dominated by that lib sensibility. It is only left if your definition of left is entirely that liberal definition of, I have a lot of gay and Muslim friends. And,
Right.
I'm down with immigrants, which in the end, they're really not, as
No.
we will see in the next segment. The immigration question is very complicated. And addressing it as bigots versus non-bigots, that is really missing a lot of territory. I will tell you, in New York City, and again, I don't want to jump on the next segment, but in New York City, if it truly is a referendum on that, he'll get reelected.
Well, this is what I'm saying. This is now the gamble. And it falls to his rivals to make it about something else. You know who his rival is? Andrew Cuomo. Andrew fucking Cuomo polling pretty damn well in New York. Despite, you have fucking people. It doesn't matter who these people are. This is why the voters, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable who these Democratic voters will elevate.
Eric Adams is such a chud. He tried to get rid of rent control by going woke about it and claiming that it affected black property owners.
Yeah, black landlords.
Who constitute 5% of landlords.
Yep.
Are black. He tried to go woke with it to try to hurt poor people. That's who Eric Adams is. Eric Adams is scum. But the immigration attitudes from the lower classes to the upper classes, and the rich liberals won't all tell you this, but as we'll see, when they put migrants in their neighborhoods, all of a sudden it was a problem. And a lot of those people all across the country, you want to know why Trump won? There are a lot of liberals who didn't talk about it, who either didn't vote for Harris or voted for Trump quietly without saying anything because they agreed with a lot of his policies, particularly in that area.
Yep. So there's a guy who caved to Trump in order to save his ass, and in doing so, set himself up for a very, very high stakes campaign season, both personally and politically, if you will. Certainly the Trump administration and now Republicans are going to back him in a big way because, look, New York is a city with a lot of money. It's a city that pulls a lot of weight. They don't want a problem mayor in New York City. They don't want a problem mayor. They want a mayor who was going to let ICE run roughshot through the city.
Yep.
So, of course, they're backing
and
Adams.
who's
Now,
highly
that's why they
motivated
dropped
to
the
do
charges.
so because of legal jeopardy.
Exactly.
They
So
own him.
Exactly. They own Adams now. They saved his ass personally from these charges. They're going to back him politically. That's why they saved his ass personally, because they don't want a problem mayor while they're doing these ICE raids. And what do the Democrats do in response? How do the people react? This mayoral race this year in New York City, now is really going to be the first real test of this immigration issue and how the deportations play out over the course of these next 9 months leading into November, right? How does the public react to that, which we'll get into in the next segment. All right,
and just one last thing. The corruption out in the open is stunning. And I know this really just broke. I know there are a lot of people who, if Biden's Justice Department had decided not to prosecute a mayor who suddenly stuck his nose up Biden/Harris's ass to avoid prosecution, oh my God, the Daily Wire segments, they'd be endless. The outrage. All of these people are either not going to say a word or they're actually going to be very supportive.
Hey, once again, the devil has the devil's luck, right? Donald Trump, wants to run ICE through New York. He just got super lucky.
Yep.
There's a compromised mayor who needs a lifeline. Throw him a lifeline. He takes it. He cooperates.
Right.
Now we back him in this campaign. Now, I don't know if they will come out and do that openly because he's a Democrat, right? But MAGA is going to be behind Eric Adams during this campaign because he's the guy they can use.
It's what they call in the business the wake up next to a dead hooker move.
Yeah, right. Exactly, yes. Sammy, thanks for the $4.99. I recall the NFL did the moment of silence, take a knee for Israel. Skyman, thanks for the $20. Unfortunately, the way I see it, most Americans have gone insane from 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, and the pandemic, not to mention the disillusionment in the institutions. The death drive of America is full effect. Yes, I agree with that 100%. Thank you for that. And thank you for that kind donation. Dems USAID for woke. Trump will turn it SS. Thank you, Brad Gilbert. Appreciate that. Skyman, thanks for another $20 from Skyman. Appreciate that. We're all basically the passengers on the Titan sub now. Rich idiots whose only skill is being rich or in control. Their ideology is basically megalomania and throw money at problem, but not my money, and give me more. Thank you, Skyman. Appreciate that. Let's see what we got here. Here we go. John N., thank you. One of Elon guys who got doxxed set up a Substack, $1,000 a month. No content, but he figured some journo would pay trying to dig up stuff. LMAO, love from Florida. Thank you. Test. We've had 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, and COVID. I'm not sure what the next disaster will be, but that will be the end of it. Kiss it goodbye. Could be right, my friend. Janice Anderson, they use marketing. Yeah. They use marketing to manufacture consent for the wealthy pricks, using terms like job creators to describe them when we all know well-paid workforce creates the demand, which created jobs. Absolutely. What? Thanks for the $19.99. How exactly do they plan to get Gazans out? P.S. Gaza will reset the world. Well, this is what it's going to come down to. Like, what are they going to do? This is why I think this is really part of why I think they're going to try and sabotage this ceasefire, because Trump doesn't want the headache of figuring out how to get the Palestinians out. He'll just let Israel handle it. That's what I think is partly motivating that. Let's see here. China Shell. My entire life, Republicans and right-wingers have controlled the narrative. Mexicans bad, handouts bad, gays bad, and the Democrats did nothing but follow along and be less shitty. No difference now. Yep. For Zen's sake, big announcement. Anna Paulina Luna will find out the truth about JFK, RFK, MLK, and UFOs as soon as she has finished carving Trump's face into Mount Rushmore. Thank you, Mr. Zen. Appreciate that. Nocturnal Human, where is the Burger King? I have come for his head. Thank you. China Shell. Yes, Keaton. These people are anti-human demons that worship Satan in a Jesus costume. Thank you, China Shell. Appreciate that. Furrow Squeen. I can't speak for the micropenis as I am not an owner. Okay. But I did mention last stream that I am paid locals member, which I can confirm is a sign of mega knockers and a bad back. Thank you, Furrow Squeen. Appreciate that. I'll start the channel. It'll be called Chud Shill and hang my head over a vat of ether before each show. There you go. Eric Rousseau. Pelosi started a YouTube channel and doing interviews on state media, insisting she be called House Majority Leader Emerita.
Are you fucking with me?
Did she start a YouTube channel?
Wow.
That'd be funny. Rewriting history. Kaepernick was all teary-eyed with the flyovers at the NFC Championship game, and his kneeling came after he was benched. I'm not talking about benched. I'm talking about not being signed to a team. The kneeling was in a preseason game. That wasn't a regular season game. So I don't remember what the deal is, why he was benched. He was still, a good player at the time. I don't know if he was a second stringer at the time. I don't believe he was. But in the preseason, that was a preseason game. That was the last preseason game of the year, I think, September 1st. I Am the Owl, the doctor who was called out of her cancer removal surgery, posted a new video that the same patient was denied an overnight stay, and United is threatening lawsuits against her for going public about this. Wow.
I heard something about that, yeah.
Winnetou Livre, NBC is reporting that King Abdullah of Jordan has agreed to take in about 2,000 Palestinian kids as long as they're sick and or wounded. Okay, so they're not. Okay, so that's not quite cucking. That's a pretty small offer. But thank you for that, Winnetou Livre. Appreciate that. Okay, why don't we go into our final segment of the day, and then we will finish out. We will take all remaining Super Chats and Rumble Rants after our last segment. But here we go. One more song.
Okay, so these days, post-Trump election, I think, I think we need to clarify why we've been complaining about the liberals, about the Democrats for all the time we've had a show. It was not because we wanted to see an authoritarian, fascist, banana republic, oligarch takeover of the government. It's because we were trying to avoid it. That is why. Now, if we're going to move forward and try to build some kind of a left movement, what happened to the Democratic Party, the way it was completely devoured from within, should be very instructive. Anybody who watched that DNC chair case, attempt to elect a chair, should really examine that and consider it as you try to build from the beginning, right? What do you want to base your movement on? You do not want to base it on screaming about identity politics issues or just falling into a very knee-jerk kind of interpretation of very complicated issues like immigration. So all that having been said, I want to point out this article is extremely libby, and that's exactly why I want to take a look at it. That's exactly why I want to examine it. So this is surprisingly USA Today. They don't usually go this way, but they went full lib on this article. The man Dr. Gray Ballinger treated Wednesday for high blood pressure delayed care out of fear of immigration enforcement, the Queen's primary care physician said. The man, whose wife has stage 4 cancer, isn't alone in his anxiety, Ballinger said. People's blood pressure is much higher than usual on a regular basis, Ballinger, who uses they-them pronouns, told USA Today. The sense of fear in Queens among immigrants is heartbreaking. Many in Ballinger's hospital, which serves a high immigrant population in one of the most diverse regions in the U.S., have worried about threats of raids by immigration and customs enforcement agents. Officials in New York City have tried to present facts and dispel myths circulating online about ICE actions, though that hasn't eased concerns. In Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen neighborhood, Ryan Health Clinic has had a drop in its waiting room since Trump took office, said Hugo Roman, a patient services representative at the Federally Qualified Health Center and a member of SEIU 1199, a labor union for health workers. The clinic has recently served the influx of asylum seekers to New York, but fewer people are making appointments. Clinic and hospital staff, with guidance if or when ICE arrives for someone, are now trying to navigate patient rights with judicial warrants for agents to arrest someone. ICE did not respond to a request for comment when asked about actions in health facilities. Immigration experts and lawyers USA Today spoke with said it's unlikely ICE would target people in settings such as schools, hospitals, and churches. Days before Trump took office, New York City officials released guidance instructing staff at public hospitals about what to do if ICE enters their facilities. The memo by City Health and Hospitals, obtained by USA Today, included information on contacting immigration liaisons, as well as making copies of warrants or subpoenas. The memo also noted, quote, "Please note it is illegal to intentionally protect a person who is in the United States unlawfully from detention. You should not try to actively help a person avoid being found by ICE." Ballinger, who is at the Queens Public Hospital, received the same memo. They said providers must obviously follow the law, but it raises concerns about how doctors and nurses care for patients. Quote, "We are on a shifting ground," Ballinger said. "We're not really sure how this would apply to patients who are in a critical scenario. For example," Ballinger said, "what about a patient on a ventilator, or a woman in labor, or who just gave birth to a child? Fundamental to a physician-patient relationship is the fact that the patient feels like they are safe with me," Ballinger said. On Thursday, New York City and state officials gathered in Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn to protest the public hospital directive. In a statement, State Senator Zelnor Miri, a candidate for mayor, good luck with that, said the guidance could intimidate people and prevent them from seeking life-saving care. City officials said in a statement that they encouraged patients to seek care before they have a serious illness or emergency. Quote, "Our focus is always on the safety of our patients and employees," the health and hospital statement said. "The policy we sent to all staff sets forth clear and understandable steps to take if an enforcement agent enters the facility, and it ensures the safety of our staff who are on the front lines every day by making sure they understand the law." Now, part of why this article caught my attention is, even though it's USA Today, it was all focused on New York. And I've actually used the Ryan Clinic when I had absolutely no insurance, because they'll take anybody. It's essentially a free clinic. You don't even have to have Medicaid to use it. Now, particularly in New York City, it is very well known that if you have to use city services, i.e. you're poor, you're going to be waiting a long time. You have a lot of people with no health insurance use emergency rooms because they can't deny you treatment. I've known people who did that. If you remove all of these immigrants, and this is what the article's really missing, they're saying these waiting rooms are empty, like people are going to see that as a bad thing. Now, the people who really need to use places like Ryan Center, don't make it a white thing. They're usually not white. They're black, brown, Asian, minorities, poor people. That's who's using those facilities. You think they're walking into the Ryan Clinic, seeing an empty waiting room, going, "Oh no, where are all the immigrants?" No, I am telling you, those people are walking into that waiting room and saying, "God damn it, Donald Trump was right. These people are the reason that we're not getting ours. These people are the reason that we have to wait 6 hours to see a doctor in our own community clinic." Now, we saw signs of this, warning signs of this, for the Harris campaign. Particularly, a lot of these videos went viral of people in Chicago talking about how this money that should be going into their community was being diverted to immigrants. Let's take a look at one example.
City of Chicago has millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to give to people who ain't paid a dime into the tax base. We've been in my building for 52 years. We're about to pay some more taxes. The Jones family has been in their building for 45 years, paying taxes every year on time. So I'm asking y'all to use our tax money for our people. We need it. We got people leaning. We got people rocking. We got overdosing. We got pass out lines. You live on the west side, Mayor Johnson. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We need the money for us. We need opioid treatment on the west side of Chicago. We are the headquarters of the cartel, and everybody in here knows it. They selling more drugs than the law can allow, and y'all giving money back to them because they traffic those people up here, so we paying them going and coming. Absolutely not. We pay too much. It costs too much money to live in this city. Help Wanda Jones. Help every other grieving mother who feels like she has to go get high to get over the loss of her child. This is a woman who lived in that house. She still sleeps in that living room where her daughter passed out and bled to death. So I'm
All right, so that does not look like a white supremacist to me. Now, another accusation that will often be thrown at the kinds of people who write articles like that in USA Today, just absolutely no nuance to the situation, who are so out of touch with the realities on the ground that they don't understand that an empty waiting room at the Ryan Center is very good for Donald Trump because it kind of proves his theory in the minds of a lot of people that you get rid of these immigrants, things are going to be better for me. Now, another accusation you'll very often hear, which has a lot of validity to it, is the NIMBY syndrome, that a lot of these liberals who are going to talk about how horrible these people who need to use clinics and emergency rooms for their health care are, for being happy to see immigrants no longer in those pipelines, blocking their access to those services. What happens when they try to move migrants and immigrant families into their neighborhoods? They are up in arms. They are out in protest. This happened very recently in New York last year in a neighborhood called Clinton Hill that's bordered by very hipster neighborhoods like Bushwick, like Williamsburg. It's kind of followed in that vein, and very much like those neighborhoods, because we have rent stabilization laws in New York. You have apartments that stay in the same family for 20, 30 years. You still have a black and Latin community in Clinton Hill, but it's mostly white people now because it's been gentrified. So let's see how they reacted to that.
We have been witnessing the escalation in violence on the street and in the community for months now.
We've been pleading with the mayor, as we've seen increased violence, that this was going to be inevitable.
And on Sunday night, it came. 2 people were murdered here, a third critically injured just outside one of the 2 adjacent shelters in Clinton Hill. It is a neighborhood now pleading for help. Residents came together tonight to demand the city provide more protection for them now and move to downsize the 2 enormous and crowded migrant shelters in Clinton Hill.
There is simply no universe where you can cram 4,000 vulnerable people together safely. Do you believe?
You think that guy votes Republican? That guy seem Republican to you?
Believe us now? How many more murders will it take?
This video is responsible for the 2 Sunday night murders. In the video, he appears to be putting a gun in his waistband. The mayor today didn't offer much hope, saying police are looking at a violent Venezuelan street gang as the people behind the shootings.
They're extremely dangerous. We're dealing with violent individuals that are not representative of the overwhelming number of people who are coming here as migrant and asylum seekers.
No one has yet been arrested for those murders on Sunday night, and that definitely hasn't made anyone here feel any safer. Police say they know who they're looking for, they just haven't found him yet.
Okay. So, you know, we're participating in Worker Strike Back in a couple of weeks. I'm sure this is one of the issues that will come up. This is something that the left needs to formulate a better answer to than we have to stop the bigots and the racists. This is an issue that, as Keaton has said, it's healthcare for leftists. They do not know how to respond to this. You cannot argue. I'm speaking as somebody who has been poor enough to use these services, who knows, and I would only go if I absolutely had to. I went to Ryan Health because I had bronchitis that I couldn't shake. I literally, I couldn't walk by the time I went there. I was walking. I never felt anything like it. I would take all my energy each step to get to the Ryan Clinic, and I had to wait for hours in that waiting room. A lot of people who now are going to see, I'm going to see a doctor in 20 minutes. Well, You're going to tell them, you know what, we need to bring back the immigrants? That's not an answer. That is going to push people like that black woman who made that speech to Mayor Johnson right to Donald Trump, right to Donald Trump. There has got to be a better answer to that. Now, our answer tends to be foreign policy. That's part of it. But you cannot simply say to people, no, you're wrong. You're a bigot. You're a bigot. There's no problem here.
Yeah, I don't think there are many people who are saying that, in our sphere at this point. I think that's obviously a loser. And once again, when you talk about winning and losing, look, we're not winning any election anytime soon. Forget about that. Forget about that. That should not even come into our consideration. In this example, not only is it a foreign policy matter, it is a healthcare policy matter, right? I mean, why aren't there more free clinics? Why isn't there free and equal health care for everybody, no matter how rich or poor you are?
Sure.
That's how they do that in every other civilized country. This is what makes the immigration issue so difficult, because it is downstream of so many other macro issues. Like, yeah, you could have sane and humane immigration policy if you had more social democratic reforms. You could have saner and more humane immigration policy if you had a saner and more humane foreign policy. Now, those are two very, very big lifts, extremely big lifts, right? So until you make those lifts, what is your answer day to day? There is no good answer day to day. That is the real challenge of this issue. That is the real trap of this issue. I think if we stop,
the liberal class doesn't want it in their neighborhood,
right?
And then the lower class is going to find certain things are going to be better. Now, in terms of, they will very often say, well, it's going to hurt businesses because these migrants actually spend money in these neighborhoods, and without them, businesses are going to go under. That's going to take more time to play out, and we'll see if that's indeed how it plays out. Are job openings going to become available, or wages going to go up? That's more of a long-term thing. But at this moment, yeah, people are going to say, oh, look, empty waiting room.
Right. And that is the challenge of the issue, because there are so many day-to-day, minute-to-minute problems.
Look how much less crowded my child's class is.
Right. And then there are so many, obviously, larger problems that could be used to fix these problems. But the timing just doesn't work out, because what are you going to do in the interim? In the interim, you're going to undermine those projects, right? You're going to undermine those projects because a lot of working class people are going to turn against the immigrant. That is how we got where we are. We just did the segment about Social Security, about how people, working class people, were made to turn against poor people, welfare queens, abusers of the system, right? The same thing happens here. So, yeah, this is definitely a topic where we need a real meeting of the minds to figure out, okay, how do we handle this? Because there's no easy way to do it. The way to do it is not, in my opinion, to double down on Trump's mass deportations. To me, that's punching sideways. It's punching down. It divides workers. That's how we got here. A divided working class is how we got here. That's how the country became so broken. At the same time, that leaves a vacuum. Okay, so then what do you do? What do you do?
And also part of what you have to address that a lot of people on the left have a very hard time acknowledging is, yes, absolutely, very often immigrants have been brought in to suppress wages. When I was in New Orleans, they had an event about incarceration, about mass incarceration, in which labor issues came up because there was a Latino participating in it who had been brought up from South America with a lot of others specifically to undercut the wages that black New Orleanians were getting for the post-Katrina construction and cleanup. He said that. He said, we didn't know anything. They offered us a certain amount of money. We agreed to do it. And later on, I found out the black workers were getting this, and we were brought in to displace them because we would work cheaper. So that absolutely happens. It has long been my theory that this was not an accident, that they allowed it to happen, and that's why. Because union organizing was starting to get a kind of momentum it hasn't had since Reagan broke the air traffic controllers, and certainly post-NAFTA, and they wanted to destabilize the labor market and suppress wages. That's not the migrants' fault. That's not the immigrants' fault, but that is what makes it so difficult, I think, for the left to address, because you don't want to scapegoat migrants. You don't want to play into the hands of this narrative that the only thing wrong with the economy is that we have too many immigrants. That's essentially what they're trying to do.
Well, you don't want to accept the framework of an austerity model, which is to say there's very little resources to go around, and if they're taking it, then goddamn them, because that the long-term effect of that is only a constant rightward drift. It can never be reversed if that's the attitude you take to it.
At the same time, you have to acknowledge that has been done for a fact. They have brought in immigrants. I mean, I heard the firsthand account of one of those immigrants who was an activist who said he didn't know. He didn't realize that's why they were brought there. So that is something that must be addressed. And I don't have all the answers. I just know the tone of that article, which is a very typical liberal take on the issue. That's not it. That's not it. That's a loser.
Well, that's why, it has to be, if you're going to oppose mass deportations, which I think we should, absolutely, then you have to do that alongside advocating for, essentially, yes, an overthrow of capitalism. And I know that sounds pie in the sky, but that is what you have to advocate for, because the alternative is a constant rightward shift. That's how we got to where we are here. Right. That's how we got to the reason why we're having these issues is because oligarchs have engineered our politics and our economics. Okay, so if you then accept their framing of things and say, well, the only way to now handle this is to round people up and kick them out because there's only so many resources to go around, as we know, especially an example of a city as opulent and as decadent as New York. If we accept that, well, we're only dealing with a small plate of crumbs here that we have to distribute amongst the poor people, well, then you're going to drift even further down this road, right? And I think it is impossible to avoid the short-term pains of that from a political standpoint. But at the same time, I think we know where the alternative leads. The alternative leads here. It leads right here. This is where we are now because they have had their way, not because they haven't had their way. What do you think? Joe Biden opened the borders, and I know he didn't open the borders. We've talked to people about this, but you think that we've had this influx of immigration because we care about the immigrants?
Of course not.
No, look at what's happening.
That's been part of my theory.
Right.
That's been part of my theory. We're committing a genocide. All of a sudden, we care about migrants?
Right.
Uniquely, of all the brown people in the world, these are the only ones we care about?
Right.
That's why the idea that this was not by design, that this was to help people, I've never accepted that because it doesn't make any sense. This is the one area where they want to help these people. Every other area, they destroy their lives, they destroy their countries, they destroy their governments, they destroy their economies, their natural environments. But when they come here, all of a sudden we care about them. It never made any sense.
Right. All right. Michael Stephen Shucks, Kurt Mode. Hi. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. Sparky saw two millennial girls react to an officer and a gentleman, an early 80s hit with girls. The two main girl characters worked in a mill the reactors couldn't release and didn't get it. U.S. mills are gone. Sparky, Kaepernick was a longtime second stringer who was on his way out anyway. Yeah, I don't remember whether or not he was a starter by that point in his career. So, I believe you on that. But I know he couldn't get signed when he went into free agency. China Shill says some poor person somewhere got an extra $200 a month they didn't work for. They might be able to afford food and luxuries. God forbid. Get to work. A Chud. Signed A Chud. So China Shill's going to be A Chud. Sparky.
Seriously, I think we should develop a satiric character and start doing A-Chud videos.
A.Chud, yes. Sparky, I wouldn't characterize the U.S. as a civilized country. Look at Gaza at all. Yep, absolutely. ISA, please edit this segment perfectly said. Yes, we will. We will make clips of all the segments today. As a Mexican-American in Chicago, I 100% agree. Thank you, ISA. Appreciate that very much. China Shill, King Kamahamaha. Wow, that's a tough one. The
Kamahamaha,
yeah. Made it legal for foreigners to buy Hawaiian land in 1848. In 1898, the Dole Company had the islands annexed to avoid tariffs on sugar. Interesting. Thanks, China Shill. Ronald Wilson Reagan. How funny how all these names have 6 letters. I'm sure he has good intentions. I'll take my take on a Bill Hicks bit. Kem and G, you guys are too cynical. Trump is a Middle East peacemaker. He's just moved on to 5D chess, which nobody else can play. If Trump cuts my Social Security and I end up having to eat cat food to live, will Maha at least make my cat food safe and healthy? You can hope, Eric Husso. A blowjob saves Social Security. Cool your jets, fellas. At least we have Nazi chic to look forward to. These cats look sharp. Trump is shaking things up and accelerating things. For a lot of people, that's enough. We're all tired of waiting around in perpetually declining purgatory twilight zone of the Democrats. All right, well, if a speedy decline into hell is what you're looking for, then you're going to be very happy.
Caesar!
Yeah.
Caesar!
You're going to be very, very happy. We're going to make you very happy. And Janice had to move to Rumble because YouTube wouldn't let me follow my previous super chat with an idea to fight back. Counter the job creator BS with the truth. Call them hoarders, moochers, or parasites. There you go. Thanks, and Janice.
They wouldn't let you post that. They're the worst.
Yeah, rough, very rough over there. $1 Million Trooper is Eric Adams or a chud or a chode, Russ. Let's have it. Yeah.
What's the difference, really? Is there a difference?
Yeah, the chode, that's what they call like how do you explain that? I would say probably is more of a chode. I don't know how to explain chode. How do you explain it? Yeah.
Urban Dictionary.
Yeah.
To the rescue.
Sparky couldn't relate, not release. Gotcha. I wanted blah blah blah. I wanted to ask if you've heard of Roy Casagandra. I have not. Have you heard of that?
Of what?
Roy Casagandra. Casagandra. I have not. I apologize.
Okay, so chode, usually penis wider than it is long.
Yeah, that's what they call
the area
like
between the penis and the anus. So that's
see,
like
I didn't know that. I just knew that I knew the slang they would
taken
call someone
from
a chode.
colloquial Spanish.
Yeah.
Lick my chode. So it's like calling someone a dick.
Yeah, or a taint. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say chode for Eric Adams. That's my vote. And with that, folks, we conclude today's program. Thank you for being here. Yes. Appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Please smash that like button on the way out. Smash that subscribe button on the way out on YouTube. Smash that follow button over on Rumble. We are at 973 likes on the afternoon. That's good for one of these. And we will see you back here Thursday, 12 p.m. noontime. Until then, thank you very much for being here today. Until we see you again, be safe and be well.
Courage!
Please clap.